What is up? It is Mock Draft Monday, the best night of the week, except that it's Monday, but, I guess we'll live with that. But I am joined by, I can't say the one and only, because as we've well established, you are not the one and only Blake Murphy, but you are the one nearest and dearest to our hearts. So you are the other Blake Murphy, but to us, you are the one Blake Murphy. Blake, it's good to have you back. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. It's been, I think, the same type of enjoyment and I guess heartbreak. At least you can see seeing a Super Bowl in which whatever team plays in there, it's going to be more home wins than the Cardinals had this season, one way or another. And it's painful, but at least I think a lot of Cardinals fans are assured that it's not the Niners for the most part that are going to be invading State Farm Stadium, not like how it was that one year with the Seahawks going to the Super Bowl. And this week it's been a little different because whether it's due to an 18th week or later, coaching search is still ongoing. We'll see exactly what happens or what turns out with the Cardinals there, as it's got more twists and turns than a season of The Bachelor right now, it seems like.
Right. I saw that tweet about that the whoever wins in the Super Bowl, because both teams have a win here this year, are gonna have more home wins or more wins at that stadium than the Cardinals did. And it's like, it's like that meme, he's out of line, but he isn't wrong. It's
painful, but
yeah. So you mentioned the coaching search, and I think that's a great segue. We like to kind of talk about just briefly talk about the general Cardinals news before we get into the mock drafts. And I'd like to hear, how do you size up where the coaching search is now? Obviously it's taken time, but only one team has filled a coaching position. So it's not necessarily, at least this point, that we're behind the curve or anything. Now we may end up being, depending on, who, hires first. So it seems to be going slow, a little bit slow for everyone. But in terms of what the Cardinals and who's in and who's out and speculated to be in and out, how do you size up where things stand right now, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's very interesting because a lot of people, I think, were assuming that when Sean Payton came in, that the Cardinals were going to probably try to pursue or get something done as soon as possible. But really, a lot of what we've seen, I think, with Arizona has been a lot more secrecy and silence this year as far as candidacy, with the exception of people knew ahead of time that they're going to interview Vance Joseph. They were going to interview the likes of I think it was Sean Payton as their top candidates. And what we've seen is that they've cast the net far and wide, but I think in years past, when you look at some of the places where they had either all the coaches were already gone in the case of Bruce Arians, except for him, that made the most sense, or in the case of Steve Wilkes and Cliff Kingsbury, you had people within the Cardinals department who were able to either share with the media who they were interested in, and with a brand new general manager in place, a brand new director of pro scouting, I should say college scouting now, you're not seeing the same amount of leaks. And so I'm wondering how much of this also, I would say, ties into NFL owners received a memo. They paid $1 billion to fire head coaches this last year. And all what has been talked about is, there's no second interview scheduled for Sean Payton. And you're like, well, Cliff Kingsbury flew in 2019 and just basically walked out with the job. That second interview may seem to be more of a requirement, whether that's part of how we've seen new Rooney Rule applications or at least just the NFL wanting teams to be more thorough. It wouldn't shock me if the NFL is trying to get teams to at least force 2 interviews before you actually get to your second interview list. And then you kind of get it. And with teams like the Broncos, you've kind of seen at least either teams will cement it quickly, as the Panthers have done, or be on a second round of interviews with players such as the Colts, Broncos, and Cardinals. I believe have had only one second interview, with that being Dan Quinn. And within 24 hours, he was back to Dallas. And it seemed very evident that maybe not leveraging, for example, but gauging out the fit of the Cardinals, or that he wasn't going to Denver. And his first call was, of course, not in person, only over Zoom. So really, the Cardinals may just simply be gathering candidates and not even putting together their list for second candidates yet, until they've been able to see every single one. Because right now, teams seem very comfortable. There's not a mad rush for any of these guys.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And the way I've kind of been looking at the interviews, though, I think people sometimes get a little too hung up on the language of first or second interview. I like to think of there's been preliminary interviews, those shorter Zoom interviews, and then full comprehensive interviews. And I think, like, for example, Sean Payton's interview was much more of a comprehensive interview.
Mm.
Dan Quinn's first one was a preliminary, and then he had his comprehensive. So in my mind, in some ways, although it's not a second interview, I think there's probably a couple candidates. Obviously Quinn,
Sure.
Sean Payton. We don't know how extensive the involvement with VJ is, but obviously they know him in the building. Those three, I feel like, and I suspect maybe Reich might have gotten more of a comprehensive interview, but I think they've probably done more comprehensive interviews than we've thought about. But I think you're right. We're seeing a lot of these first interviews and new first interviews that are going to be coming out with the Cincinnati coordinators, and we'll probably see more of those second/comprehensive interviews coming. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So obviously we'll be talking about that a lot in the coming weeks. We obviously, though, we want to get into the draft stuff. Let me real quick say hi to the folks who've jumped in the chat, and then we'll get into our mock drafts. We got Van, who had a comment earlier. Ryans is Houston Texans. I think a lot of people assume that D'Amico Ryans is going there. He was my first choice. I love his potential, but it looks like he's going to Houston. Only one left is Payton. Now that I don't. I think people are underselling some of the other coaches out there. I know for a lot of people it was Payton or Ryans or bust, but it does seem like, Ryans is probably out of the picture for the Cardinals. We've got Grandizer holding down the chat, doing what he does. We appreciate you, Grandizer. We've got
Shout out
Cardinals being here. Mock Draft Monday. Let's go Cardinals. We got Simon G. Appreciate you being here. MDM. The only thing worth looking forward to on Monday is I appreciate you. Grimdark made it. We got Taylor Berry. Underrated offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich. Man, I don't know. He had a rough year. I think he's going to have to go somewhere and rebuild his kind of his resume, so to speak, before he gets a shot because of how things kind of went there today. But we've got Eduardo. Thank you for being here. It's John Michael Schmitz. Oh, there will be some John Michael. He's our center Schmitz today. We got Chris Young here. And we have Jake McAllister saying, hey, Joe, thank you, Jake, for being here. Hey, hope you're doing well. All right. So let's get into this. Blake has an hour roughly with us, so we're going to go through what we can get through, and then we'll give him a chance to leave, but I will hang out and go over the rest of the mocks with you. And we're going to start, though, with what I try to do every week is profile a card or a draft prospect that I think is interesting. Now, folks who are here with Mock Draft Monday know that this is kind of the place for me. This is how I learn about the draft class. Like, I'm still learning. I think for Cardinals fans who are joining us, it's a great opportunity to learn about the draft class so that everyone learns about the first round prospects. But when someone gets taken in round 6 and you know who they are and know a little bit about what they might bring, that makes it more enjoyable and enriching to me. And I know folks who are part of our Mock Draft Monday streams last year appreciate that. So one of the things I try to do is profile a draft prospect who I think is going to go somewhere second round or later, and just talk about kind of what I think is interesting and how they might fit for the Cardinals, just as a way for me to learn about them and you. So this week, I'm going to go with a prospect that I know. Jordan P., you're going to love this. I know you're really high on this guy. So the person I'm going to go with is a running back out of Texas, but it is not Bijan Robinson. It is his backup, Rashawn Johnson. He's a halfback out of Texas, 22 years old. He's a senior, 6'2", 223. I have here projection as a day 3 pick. Maybe I could see him sneaking into the 3rd round, but to me, he seems like more of a 4th or 5th round guy. And, I've got his PFF grades here, and he graded pretty well, across the board, all 3 years there. The thing I like about him, one, is he's a really good player. On most other college teams, I think he'd probably be starting, certainly on a lot of them, but he's behind like the best running back prospect to come out in a while. So, he's got that, but he's effective. But you've got an effective running back who still has a lot of tread on the tires, right? He hasn't had that heavy workload, and that's the thing you worry about with running backs. And I think when you're looking for, and I think you see this a lot with running backs. You have running backs who get drafted late or even go undrafted who end up being really good. Like guys like Arian Foster who just surprise everyone. And with those guys, you're looking for what I like to call market inefficiencies. What is it about that person that caused teams to miss on them, right? What was it? when it's so competitive in terms of the draft, there's these players under a microscope, and all it takes is like one little question mark to bump them into the day 3 when they might have the talent to be a day 2 prospect. So for me, what I think is simply the fact that he wasn't a starter is one of those potential things that might cause teams to kind of undervalue him. So this is a guy that, like, in day 3, those picks, you take risks. There's the risk tolerance is higher, right? Because they're not the premium picks. So if he's there in round 5, and the Cardinals, obviously I feel like they should take a running back or maybe even 2 this draft to add to that depth. This is a guy I'd want to take a flyer on. Jordan P. He supports this. He's a fan. He says his at 6'2", 220, his projected 40-yard dash time is 4.3, right? So, like, I just monologued. Do you
pretty
have
quick? It's pretty quick, I will say, at least. I think obviously when you're looking at the prototypical, it is a spot of not having as many carries. Sometimes you'll end up seeing some of those guys come out of college and be able to hit big. Other times you do look for that type of production. I like to think of how David Johnson didn't have maybe the most production, but was a freak athlete, was able to have receiving skills. I think that when you're looking at the Cardinals, you're probably going to be looking at next year or this year for sure drafting a running back, because for all that we talk about how people don't take running backs in the first round, there is definitely a premium of the backs that have the most athleticism and the biggest size are the ones that perform and stay in the league the longest. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the avenues that you kind of get those guys by drafting them earlier. I think I like round 2 is kind of the sweet spot, but with all the needs the Cardinals have, you got to wonder at least if maybe this is the year you beef up the O-line, take a running back. You got James Conner coming back here. Mm-hmm. Also depends on the coach. If you're going to have a run first team, then maybe you do end up seeing the team invest a little higher pick for the most part than on day 3. But I think I agree with you that right now, when you're talking about trying to find those high upside types of guys, or finding guys who have experience, but maybe don't have the significant injuries, maybe don't have the significant carries that some players can have coming out of time. I think of Todd Gurley, a player who was uber talented, came out injured, was super successful, and then by the time he reached age 27, it was like he was a 32-year-old back.
Right. Yeah. He aged very quickly. So I like this as a potential. Now, personally, for me, the sweet spot for running backs is 4th and 5th round. I get that 2nd round is where you find guys like Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry. So I get, like, if you want to go premium at running back, 2nd round is the sweet spot. I agree with that. For how I like to build a roster, I like to go more the way, and I know they've flown against us this year, but the way San Francisco does, where they build that offensive line really well and then plug in, they go undrafted free agents, but go guys in 4th and 5th round. And you see a lot of guys like Aaron Jones come out in those rounds, and Pierce with Houston. So I like, from a roster building perspective, 4th and 5th round. But if you want to build your team around a running back, 2nd round is definitely the place to get that premium guy. So I think you're right there. I like this, and obviously Jordan P really likes it. Jordan P says he wasn't used like a general backup, as many would assume. They would use him sometimes even over Bijan on crucial 3rd and 4th downs. Yeah, he definitely he was not just a couple carries guy. He had, close to 100 carries. So yeah, absolutely. So, and AZ us, yeah, Blake is a gangster. You have a fan in the audience, Blake. So it's good to have you here. All right. So and then Austin KK is saying, I like Kenny McIntosh late in draft. So do I. And I love him in, like, if he shows up in the 6th round for me a lot, he might go earlier than that. But he's a really good receiving back. It reminds me a little bit of James Cook, but bigger. Obviously playing in Georgia. But, like, to me, in a lot of my mock drafts, I like taking 2 running backs. I believe James Conner, I like having James Conner. I like the potential of Keontae Ingram, but I love getting a big back like Rashawn Johnson, who is kind of the heir apparent to James Conner, and then getting a receiving back to be that change of pace back, and developing those 2 guys in a couple of years from now, have them as our kind of dual threat. So I like McIntosh a lot as well.
Yeah. Yep,
So
I was going to say one
yeah,
thing real quick on Rashawn.
yeah,
If you wanted to find some recent comparisons, if you think he's going to end up being a guy who drafted round 4, maybe he sneaks up into round 3 with the size. But you take a look at the guys like a Damian Pierce, you even look a couple
yeah.
years back to a Ramondre Stevenson over a year
Mm,
ago with the Patriots. These are guys who were the same huge, big size, prototypical, ended up being either at smaller schools or had other questions and have kind of turned into being huge playmaking
yeah.
backs while not necessarily being the same draft capital as a guy like a Leonard Fournette or a Christian McCaffrey going top 5. Those are kind of some backs that I think you can say that maybe they're not the round 2 or round 1 franchise level backs, but you can kind of find a gem if you end up going
Mm.
for some of those traits and are able to hit on a guy. And wouldn't shock me if the Cardinals, I've said, I think they're going to need a running back at some point, not just even this year, but you're talking about for future years as well. And it's really
Yeah.
hard to trust a rookie back for the most part taken on day 3.
Completely agree. And I think, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what you're hoping he could be. If you build the defense and the offensive line, you can have a really nice team with that structure. So absolutely. So we're gonna get in now. Blake, you prepared 2 mock drafts. You did a full first round mock draft, right? And you've got a scenario you want to kind of present in that. And then you've got your regular Cardinals mock draft that we'll get into. So I'm gonna put your full first round mock draft and then you explain to us kind of what you're using this mock to illustrate.
Yeah, well, the biggest one I think at least, and this is part of just you look at mock drafts every day, but when you're picking at 3, you kind of end up seeing the same thing again and again, which is usually, hey, we'll take one of Will Anderson, one of Jalen Carter, or we'll trade back. And so then
Yeah.
this is a scenario where it's like, all right, well, is there a 4th option? If the 4th option, maybe say worst comes to worst, ends up passing, what would then be the option for the Arizona Cardinals? Like, assume that you can't trade back, whether one reason or another, or even let's say in this scenario, I have Jalen Carter going at 1. The Bears end up saying we'll trade this pick for however many firsts. Teams are just not as sold on this quarterback class. Maybe we saw that a year ago that we had all this talk of quarterbacks going in the top end. I think there might be still 1 or 2 that could go top 1 or 2. I just think I'm looking at what would be that alternate scenario. And the second round, what I have is I've got the I've got an interesting case where the 49ers end up actually trading away Trey Lance to the Houston Texans and end up getting back a draft pick in return at the top 12, whether that's to look at a quarterback for the future if they're not sold on Lance, or just to build up this roster around Bryce Younger. I should say not Bryce Young, but Brock Purdy, or maybe even a Tom Brady signing potentially.
Ooh.
If you look at one of those areas, all of a sudden that means that the Texans can take the best defensive player on the board. And all of a sudden the Cardinals are sitting there, no Jalen Carter, and there's no Will Anderson. You could say no quarterback has come yet, but let's say that the Indianapolis Colts go out, they make a move, they bring in a quarterback such as a Derek Carr, which they've done in the past few years, bring in a quarterback. There's talk of Jeff Saturday potentially as the head coach. It almost seems like if we think of that suck for luck year that happened, it was almost very clear Jim Caldwell was going to get fired. If you end up in a scenario where teams are not looking to hop ahead of the Colts for a quarterback, Cardinals may be stuck. So what do you do? Well, in this scenario, I say, let's take a look back at the 2011 draft class. You talk about Von Miller. That's probably the closest comp for a Will Anderson type. Is there an Aldon Smith type pass rusher in this class? And I think that there is. I think that you could look at Tyree Wilson, the defensive end who can play inside and outside out of Texas Tech. 6'6", measures, weighs in at 285. Would have to see what the combine would be. But the kind of comparisons when you look at a guy who's got freaky long arms, who does these crazy, like you talk about his ability as being able to shed quickly in the run game and then being able to see at least that length as a pass rusher, kind of would be interesting to see if that could be that Aldon Smith type, or as some have mentioned, very similar to Chandler Jones coming out. And I think that would be a question then of, even if you look at a Jalen Carter type player, could the Cardinals just be finding an edge rusher with this pick be potentially even more impactful than a interior defensive line? I can share a little bit more about some of that 2011 class and that there's pros and cons, but I just wonder, is this idea of, hey, if Will Anderson's gone, you're taking Jalen Carter, like that's it. I think maybe we can push back on some of that narrative, but also let's wonder and say, if there's 2 quarterbacks that go, what about if the worst case scenario happens? Can the Cardinals still get a good player? And I think the answer is they totally can.
That's interesting. Now, I will tell you, I do a lot of these mocks, and This is the nightmare scenario for me, that that those two go 1 and 2, and that there isn't a partner to trade back. Because when Carter and Anderson are gone, I immediately hit the eject button. I want to trade back. There's some cornerbacks I like, middle of the first round. There's even receivers I like, other edge rushers that I don't mind taking a little bit later. But there is no one other than Carter or Anderson that I feel good about taking in the top 3. And I've looked at Wilson, and he's an interesting prospect with those long arms. There's another guy out of, I think, Army, Andre Carter, I think, in the second round, who is a similar kind of big freaky. And I prefer to go with a guy, take that kind of, shot later than big 3. So that's interesting. I mean, there have been a lot of people who've mocked him. I wonder how many of them did that because of the Texas Tech thing before, when Cliff was still here. So that's an interesting, what do you do in that situation? And I'll be honest, like when I look at the first round, and maybe it's just how I don't feel like the Cardinals should be taking a tackle in the first round. They need a right tackle, but they have 2 left tackles. There's bigger needs. So like guys like Skoronsky, okay, if you take him, you move him to guard. That's a little early for a guard. I think it's early for a center unless you're in the back half. I don't mind edge rushers. I love Jalen Carter, but like the rest of it is like safeties, receivers, cornerbacks, which I wouldn't mind, but like there's just a lot of positions that I'm not wanting to take in the first round that are there. So I always find myself in a really weird kind of situation. Even when I trade back, it's usually I end up taking a cornerback. So that's interesting. Now you have though, some more picks here, even another Cardinals pick. Do you want to talk about what's going on there in the back end of that first round?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think some of what I think, if you look at this mock, that I can kind of say is you look at how the quarterback carousel works out. And that's where some of these may be surprises when you look at stuff like you're seeing Anthony Richardson to the Ravens. Okay, well, in this scenario, you can say that that was the pick that was given away from the Falcons trading for a Lamar Jackson. There's been plenty of rumors about Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets because, what better way to completely become Brett Favre that you've always meant to be. It's like it's like he would finally become that Sith Lord that he'd always been assuming that Brett Favre had been. There's also then areas of like Derek Carr was held out. Does he stay? Where does Tom Brady end up? Does he go back to a place like the Niners? Does he stay with the Bucs, or does he go to a team like the Raiders? And some of these places, I think you try to figure out. It's almost like that game of musical chairs. When the chairs and the quarterbacks that are available stop, that's where I think then you can determine where teams will go from there. So in this scenario, I've got, all right, Colts don't go for a quarterback if they hire Jeff Saturday. Let's say that they're going to pursue an offensive lineman. Well, that's going to clear up a team like the Panthers to go and grab a Will Levis, a guy who's got a lot of physical upside. Same thing, at least with other teams sticking with their quarterback. And then what I think is most interesting is I ended up having Bryce Young fall a bit further than I thought. As far as what I really think, this is more of a scenario of, let's say that the Texans go outside of Bryce Young to try to get their draft needs handled. Here I had them giving up a pick, being able to get Trey Lance, reuniting him with D'Amico Ryans. Mine is not necessarily a done deal to the Texans, but it feels almost like it'd be the Texans screwing it up. It seems that there is mutual interest. And then as a result, you look also further down the line. And what that also means then is that you see a team then trade back who wasn't able to get Bryce Young fall to them. And the Eagles are able to make a suddenly big move, add a Bijan Robinson to that offensive line, to that game. You talk about then being able to have Jalen Hurts paid on this huge contract, and then you've got this playmaking running back that goes next with him. All of a sudden, it makes a lot of sense to see that the Eagles could continue to repeat with having guys under contract for the next 4 to 5 years, the core of their team. That would almost allow them, I think, at least, to not have to worry about paying 2 of their running backs. Instead, they just are able to get the best back in the draft and keep that dominant offense going. And then I think the rest of the draft kind of shook out a little bit interesting for some places. You had some teams trade up and move around, getting some different picks depending on who was trading for the different quarterbacks. The move that I had that I thought was interesting here is the Cardinals in this scenario. You trade away DeAndre Hopkins for a second-round pick. In this mock, I think I had him going to the Chargers somewhere in the late second round. Cardinals need a center. You look at what's upcoming. You've got the Bengals, at least, are picking around, say, pick 28. You also can talk about teams like the Broncos, even teams in the second round, such as the Steelers. If the Bears are able to trade back that pick at all, they could probably use a center. This basically made it where the Cardinals had an extra second-round pick and a need for a center. So I had them trading up into the first round for a John Michael Schmitz.
It's got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
Yes. Everyone was waiting for that.
Oh, that video. Yes. No, but I think that right now when you're looking at Arizona and say their needs and even how it fits with Kyler Murray, he's a shorter quarterback. You talk about with some of what's helped shorter quarterbacks succeed, and a lot of it with Russell Wilson and Drew Brees. They had all pro centers under their center for them, with Max Unger going from one team to the other. I think that by building the lines from the inside out would be one of the preferences. Unless the Cardinals are going to start from scratch with the likes of a DJ Humphries, I wouldn't, unless they're going to say, we'll ship him away, bring a young pick in. You've already got your 2 tackles. I think that you want to try to build from the inside out. And here I took a chance in saying, if this guy is going to be the standout best center, and a team like the Bengals may be looking to move on from a center potentially, since we all saw how Joe Burrow at least has been hit repeatedly, that would be a move that I think in this scenario, I would say makes a whole lot of sense. And then the Cardinals could still have another later second round pick to address some further needs.
Yeah, I've been taking John Michael Schmitz in the second round pretty consistently. And I even end up trading back from pick 34 to like the 40s to take him, because he usually is still available on PFF's mock draft simulator there. But in real life, I have this fear he is going to sneak into that first round. Usually the best center in the draft kind of ends up going there in the late 20s, kind of sneaks back up in there. I know some people talk about he's a little bit older of a prospect and that maybe works against him, but he has been so good, consistent year in and year out. So, and you talk about there's some teams back there who could use a center. That makes a lot of sense. For all of us who are hoping we get him in round 2, he might not be there. And we might be, if we don't make a move like this, we might be looking at one of the other centers like Whippler or someone like that. So yeah, I like it. Anything else you want to add before we look at your Cardinals mock draft?
I think the biggest one, if you're looking at how things were, I thought was very interesting was you always look at different rankings, and a lot of the rankings I think don't get finalized until the combine, whether it's due to conversations and scouts or preseason hype. Good example would be in PFF's mock, I've consistently seen Keely Ringo kind of fall into the second round. And teams seem to just like corners. There's also been an interesting hype around the likes of Lucas Van Ness. It's going to be interesting to see how some of these guys end up fitting, because the one thing I'll say right now is it's not a wide receiver heavy draft. The guy who is, I think the biggest surprise I heard was that there's some people who love Quentin Johnson, who's kind of that prototypical Mike Williams contested catch receiver on the outside. And then you compare him to the smaller Jordan Addison and then a Jackson Smith and Jigba who got hurt, then was excelling at least out of the slot at Ohio State with 2 first-round picks. But outside of that, you've got people saying, oh, look at these tight ends, look at this. And really, ultimately, what we see with a lot of teams is if it's a defensive heavy draft and those guys are not as, like teams will always kind of be honest with who they draft about what they think of them. Those guys will either go earlier if they love them, or they'll end up falling if teams don't love them. And right now it's really tough to see that teams are not going to necessarily just look at this as a build the trenches type of draft, knowing that next year's wide receiver class, like, I don't know if people are going to tank for Marvin Harrison Jr. versus a quarterback, but you can bet that he's going to go pretty high.
Yeah, and PFF's, I like PFF's their work, but it has its limitations. They are so analytics driven, and I think where they probably miss on their draft rankings and projections is they based it a lot more on the production and the tools and the combination of that. But I think that teams and their scouting look a little bit more at the tools and what a person could be. PFF looks at what they have been and some of what they could be. I think scouts look at more what they could be, and they kind of draft a little more heavily towards guys that may not have produced at the same level you might want, but have those projectable tools. So a guy like Ringo, for example, had a little bit of a rough go late in the season, but has some of those tools. I'm going to say hey to some of the folks that have jumped in the chat real quick, and then we'll get to your Cardinals mock. So some of the folks who've jumped in here, thanks for being here, Agent 47. I'm not be pissed if we trade back even if Anderson Carter's on the board, but I like Cardinals to take one of this two. For me, again, I hope it's either, for me, it's one of those two or trade back, right? Calvin, thanks for being here. The net thrown for head coach is wide. Is it a bit too wide or just right? I feel like it's good. I think it's Everyone's taking a long time except for Carolina, but appreciate you being here. We got JP. I guess we're doing Steve Keim approach tonight. Okay, maybe. I don't know. No offensive tackle deserving at 3. Not in this draft, probably. Let's see. We got Ian Keller. Thanks for being here. Really, Tyree. Gotta hope this doesn't happen. Now,
I've gotten a lot of these comments, at least from people
Yeah.
too, when they've either seen this. And I even said the hot take I had was, let's see what happens with the likes. I know last year you saw Jordan Davis. He was a defensive tackle, huge, like had a freaky combine, and he still didn't going until like the teens. With Jalen Carter, the same guy out of Georgia, I think a lot of people are looking at each of those. The question I think you have is, and this is maybe looking at the areas of production, is last year, Travon Walker, #1 overall pick. He has 13 total sacks in college. A lot of people looked and said, well, yeah, that's Georgia. It's the SEC. Tyree Wilson's playing in the Big 12. And I think if you look back and see in the past with Aldon Smith and see when Missouri was in the Big 12, that's where he came out of. A lot of times I think you look at guys who have both the potential, like you said, but also the production. That's kind of what ends up being the difference between what I think ends up being maybe a upside top 10 or a first round pick to the guys who are going in the top 5. And a good example someone gave was, let's say that you get to Seahawks and let's say you get to a team that's after them like the Lions. Who are they probably picking if the Cardinals, for example, traded out and someone else took a quarterback? And the answer consistently is, they're probably taking Tyree Wilson because he's a 6'6", 270-pound guy who's a freak athlete and has produced like crazy as far as in the Big 12. And that's something I think that's worthwhile. He's never had a 10-sack season. I don't think it's a spot where, to me, it's very clear Will Anderson is one. I think it then comes down to some positional value as well. And it'll be interesting to see with the Cardinals and what happens. I know, obviously, that this is worst case scenario. Again, I said that I think there's at least one quarterback would go ahead of this. I think the Bears would be looking to trade down first. But in the chance that they didn't, I'd say, can the Cardinals still at least get a successful player? And I think that they could in the likes of Tyree.
Yeah, and two things I would kind of add just kind of in your defense is, one, one of the reasons we do this stream is to game out different scenarios. And so I'm really glad we get to see and think about what does it look like when some of those levers are pulled differently. I'm assuming this is not your favorite prospect for them, but you wanted to see what it would look like. And I think there's value to kind of gaming that out. And so I try to mix up my mock drafts every week for that reason. And the second thing I would say is, it seems like every year there is a pass rusher who kind of climbs up the board, who surprises people and gets picked in the top 10 or even top 5 that wasn't originally thought to be. Like Walker, you mentioned, he kind of was, at least in terms of the perceptions from fans and the media, was a late riser, right? Everyone thought it would be Thibodeau or, someone else or Hutchinson, and then Walker, boom, so that happens. So it could be Tyree Wilson. It could be Miles Murphy. It could be someone else, but there's probably a pass rusher who's going to kind of go up those boards and get taken in the top 5 to 7, at least, if not top 3. So absolutely. So real quick, I'll say to some of the other folks that have jumped in here, Moore's Legacy. Bro, I missed 20 minutes. Well, we're glad you're here either way. Troy had the hit it when we had the John Michael Schmidt song. Appreciate Troy, who's also one of my regular co-hosts. Thanks for being here. The Bird Alert, absolutely no chance all these QBs falls. I think we probably would all agree probably at least one of them goes earlier. Again, this was gaming out a scenario, though. Right, Rashad Paines, did I just come in and see Tyree 3? You did.
Yes. Good point on the quarterbacks there, though. I mean, if D'Amico Ryans goes to Texas, or the Houston Texans, I should say, where did D'Amico Ryans go to college, anyone? The answer is he went to Bama. So that may cue you in, I think, as to, I don't know who the pick is, but if it's Bryce Young or Will Anderson, I wouldn't be shocked because of those connections.
Yeah, for sure. Red Sea, work is finally slowed enough for me to hop in. Appreciate you being here. Let's see if there's anyone else who just jumped in. I tried to get everyone commented at least once. Michael is this mock is, what is this mock? Well, Michael, it's what I just told you. It's kind of gaming out some different things just to see what it looks like. All right, we've got Teddy LBZ. We can all agree inside linebackers early and often, right? The Steve Keim special, right? Oh man. All right. So I think I've said hey to everyone once. So let's get to your 7-round mock that you did. And I think this one's a little different, but still some similarities. So let's go to this, and then you talk about kind of what your picks were here and your thought process.
Yeah, so in this scenario, I ran it and I decided to use the same scenarios I had up front. I could have probably changed it and made it where Will Anderson fell. And I know some people have mentioned, do you take the player or do you take the draft picks? For me, I think that you've got a level of prospect that essentially is going to go probably top 2 in almost every draft, like the Nick Bosa type, the Joey Bosa type. If you're in a scenario where this is like the 2016 draft and Joey Bosa is the best player in the draft, but you end up seeing a quarterback in Carson Wentz, quarterback in Jared Goff go first, and you're the one who gets to benefit from that. I don't think that you can pass that up. So I know people have wanted to trade back, add more talent. I think that for me, it's more of if Anderson's on the board, I think I basically just have the card and just run up to the podium. They already know who the pick is going to be. If he's not on the board, that's where I think then maybe there's a little bit more leeway. And some of that may be also about the defensive tackle position as it comes to the Cardinals too. But what I did in this scenario was I had the Cardinals at least were picking 3. I wasn't able to necessarily get John Michael Schmitz. Instead, we saw Keely Ringo fall to the second round. This is a spot where you're able to address corner. I do think that he'll go higher than this, but I think the idea of getting a pass rusher and getting a corner is something the Cardinals may need regardless, because even if you look at the Cardinals and how they're built, let's say they sign Byron Murphy, let's say they bring back Zach Allen. Do you still need an alpha type of pass rusher? I think probably, yeah. I like Cam and I really like MyJ. But if you look at those two guys and look at like the high level pass rushers, like even I'd say George Karlaftis. Someone said, "Oh, Cardinals shouldn't have taken Karlaftis. Oh, he's got upside his cap. These guys are going to explode." It's like, well, like Karlaftis got 6 sacks this year, and he's been making plays in the playoffs. He's a higher upside guy than either of those two. They both got 6 sacks this year. How many sacks does George Karlaftis have? Well, he's got 7 and counting now with how the Chiefs are going. There's just differences, I think, between what I call the alpha, your main pass rusher, and maybe kind of the second tier pass rushers. Like I think if you got your Chandler Jones, you've got your Marcus Golden, and maybe your Devon Kennard on the other end. Those are kind of the ways that teams can build, where you don't want to just have only one pass rusher that just gets triple teamed. And you want to make sure that you've got those second level pass rushers. I think that it's great to say that the Cardinals have those guys in Cam and in MyJ, but I don't think we should be making them into tier 1 pass rushers until like they actually go out in the field and prove it with like, multi-sack seasons. They're going to get like 90 million guaranteed, at least those types of plays. And as a result, I felt like that cornerback, same with Byron Murphy. I feel like the Cardinals could use another corner. Even if they pay Byron Murphy, you're going to be wanting to probably bring in some other type of stability. It's going to be very difficult to either say we've got to pay Byron or we're going to be paying someone else.
Yeah.
Because that's just how bereft that Steve Keim left them at the corner position. He has preferred to let guys go into that contract year, get the production, and then kind of pony up after they've become more expensive, or suddenly it's, oh, wow, this player actually didn't perform in a contract year. We got to go out and address this need. I think being able to lock in 2 young corners and being able to sign Byron and move ahead, I think that will be a solid way of saying the defense is at least been built out well. That's at least for the first 2 rounds. I felt like it was almost too good a value to pass up for Ringo. And again, Wilson was the guy that I felt like if there's another player I'm going to have to take with those 2 off the board, I think you take him. And I don't know if it's a slam dunk necessarily, but I think that he's going to be a fantastic player.
Yeah, and so I agree with you on cornerback. I mean, I really like Antonio Hamilton, but he's not that young. He's getting close to 30, but played well. Marco Wilson has really come on, especially second half of the season. I did a video about that, and he's real. I had concerns about him, but he's really impressing, I think, and I like his potential. Byron Murphy, we don't know, and this is one thing that I keep saying. We all think as fans that we should bring him back. He's a local product, and we like him, but we don't know what Austin Fort is going to think. I've said multiple times in my streams and in Discord, there might be some players we think will be back that Austin Fort decides he doesn't want based on how he wants to build this thing. So be prepared for some surprises. So we don't know yet, but even if they do bring back Murphy, to your point, look at it this way. Let's say Wilson and Murphy are 2 of you need 3 cornerbacks that are starting caliber. Hamilton, I think, is in that he plays like a starter. I think he's earned that, but he's older. You probably bringing him back for only 1 or 2 year deal. You need to develop someone who takes Hamilton's place And then 3, 4, 5 years from now, if you have Marco Wilson becoming what he hoped he could be, Byron Murphy becoming what he looks like he can be, and someone we've drafted, that's a really nice cornerback room. So I'm with you. Taking a cornerback makes sense. And Kelee Ringo, if he slides there, yeah, he struggled, but the talent's there. You do that. And you mentioned, kind of the whole interior defensive line thing. Or no, I'm sorry, you mentioned the pass rushers, the premier pass rushers, which we don't have. I love Marcus Golden, but his play has fallen off. I love the potential of Maje, but we need to see more from him. I love, Cameron Thomas, but none of them are really solidly proven as top tier guys. But the way I've been approaching it, and I think there's more than one way to make this work, is I love Jalen Carter for me ahead. I mean, Will Anderson's a great player, and I'm not saying anything bad about him. He's going to be a stud. But I really like, just from a roster building perspective, going the Jalen Carter route and building the interior pass rush, and that takes some of the pressure off the outside guys and lets them develop. And if you want to take someone later, but kind of with that as kind of sort of a segue, there's a really good question that Rashad here posted. It'd be interesting because people are talking about, it's with the question of Jalen Carter versus Will Anderson is like Bosa versus Quinnen Williams. They're both good. Which flavor of ice cream do you want, right? Which type of roster do you want to build? So what are your thoughts on this question, how you would compare Quinnen Williams to Jalen Carter?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and the first thing you look at least, is as far as it goes with whether it's production, rotation time, were they an impact player when it mattered, is what a lot of scouts will look at, as well as just seeing how they produced. In college, and this is kind of also the college to NFL area, there's always a difference where maybe not that stats are inflated necessarily, but like a good example someone would give would be Quinnen Williams is probably not going to have 19 and a half tackles for loss in an NFL season because it's just like, that's ridiculous as far as the numbers. He also had 10 sacks in his total, 8 in his last year at Alabama. Just was a tackle machine. What's different about the likes of Jalen Carter is he's been really a guy that's popped out to a lot of film people who see him tossing guys, being able to go kind of living in teams' backfields. But one of the things that's interesting is he's played for maybe a little bit more. He's got in 3 years, but he's a little bit lower as far as the production and some of the sacks. He's had 6 sacks and he's got 18 and a half tackles for loss. And part of the reason when you look at some of that is his snap counts. Quinnen Williams was a guy that was basically like on the line for Alabama. It didn't come off unless he was hurt, and he even fought through an ankle injury. Whereas Jalen Carter's kind of never played more than like 65% of the snaps in a season, which is interesting. So then the question is this just Georgia having a plethora of riches rotating guys in? He did seem a bit winded at times against I think it was Ohio State in that playoff game where they were rotating him in. I think that's one of the places, at least, where if you're looking at it, that would be the first question I think you would have is this guy on the same level of Quinnen Williams? I don't think that he is quite yet. I think that he's very close, which is great. It's like probably the closest we've seen. The other area of positional value is if you look at Quinnen Williams' career, he kind of broke out this year. Like it took a couple years. Obviously, there's the Jets that have to be a factor. But he had 12 and a half sacks this season, ended up kind of having his kind of breakout year. He's got 27 and a half so far, 27 and a half sacks. When you compare that to an edge rusher, as far as for production, it's kind of a weird facet of if you find that guy and they excel, like you get your JJ Watt, you get your Aaron Donald. For every JJ Watt and Aaron Donald, you got to look at a team that essentially said, we're going to go and find that next guy, like the Marcel Darius, who was picked 3rd overall in the 2011 NFL draft. And you're like, oh, so this is a guy who was taken ahead of an Aldon Smith, ahead of other pass rushers, just didn't pan out the same way. He was a good player, but just not the same. And the best example I can think of is in that 2019 draft, Quinnen Williams has 26 and a half, I think it's now 27 and a half sacks in his career. 26 and a half sacks for Josh Allen is the guy who, and a lot of people have said Josh Allen has not played as well the last couple of years, but he's still producing on like that high level, at least that you'd expect from the edge rusher. And I don't think he's gotten more than 10 sacks the last 3 years, at least with Josh Allen. So you're like, okay, he had one great year, had gotten injured in a year. Really what I think it tells you is that with a lot of interior guys, there still is interior guys blow up the run, stuff the run. And occasionally you can find that interior disruptor, that Aaron Donald type or that Ndamukong Suh. But more often you can see guys and getting pressure off of the edge. And let's be honest, the Vance Joseph defense showed that you want to make sure that you're getting pressure from more than just one place, because when we saw how the Cardinals this year, they could get sacks, and that was really what kept them in the game, were those big plays. I think that would be a spot of positional value where I think that if I'm saying he's not the same level as a Quinnen Williams and he's a defensive tackle, that would lead me to say that maybe you should look at an edge rush over him. Especially because that may be a spot of, hey, Quinnen's finally hitting. It's been 4 years or so that he finally got to be equal to the production of a Josh Allen. And I think that he's trending better as his career goes, but it's just one of the spots of he's a defensive tackle, and we've seen teams be able to do well with defensive tackles for the most part. Think of a Javon Kinlaw being another example of a guy who hasn't maybe quite panned out the same way as the Niners were expecting, because draft will still have hits and it will still have misses.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of defensive tackles on day 2 that I really like, that are kind of round 3 guys that I think are really interesting. So that's a fair point as well. A couple of comments I just want to hit on and say hey to the folks as well. Jason Garcia saying Jalen Carter, it's Jalen Carter, I hope. Do you think they'd trade D-Hop for picks? I know, like, you had DeAndre Hopkins traded there. Hopkins met with Austin Ford, I believe, this recently. We don't know what came of that, but it was the discussion of his future. To me, it all comes down to, I think Austin Ford wanted to gauge where Hopkins was at. Does he want to stay here and be part of this build or not? And if Hopkins wants to, then I do think they'll keep him. But if he in any way kind of balks at that, I think he's going to be gone. And I think it's a real question. I think there's a good chance they'd trade him, but I could also see him, because Hopkins also, I like his character. I could see him saying, you know what? No, I'm here. I want to be part of this. It depends on what he said. So we'll be finding out about that. Doc's Cards, thanks for being here. Appreciate you dropping in. Allen working his way up to tier 1 status. Zach Allen. Now you talked about those tier 1 pass rushers. Now Allen's more of a 3 technique, that interior more. So he's that interior pass rusher. Where do you see in terms of his, obviously the injury kind of knocked him out back part of the season, but where do you see in terms of where Allen is and where he's going in his development?
Yeah, I think with Zach Allen, if you had to pick one player that right now is kind of in that spot of you'd say you want to keep him, I think that the easiest thing for development is you can take a look at with Cameron Thomas and Zach Allen. If you keep a Zach Allen around, which I think the Cardinals will want to, then I think that you could either slide Cam Thomas into some of that JJ Watt spot, or you could just say, hey, Zach, you were a guy that was mentored under JJ for 2 years. We'll put you into that place. That way we can keep someone like Cam up as far as an edge rusher. Then you're able to kind of see about some more explosiveness. Cam is one of those guys that I think could end up moving to a defensive end type of role versus edge, which would be more of that DT, DE type of role. And I know some have talked about how Quinnen Williams, like maybe that was part of the reason or change. He's played enough snaps at least at those kind of pass rushing roles to get in there. And it just sometimes takes time or takes some developments. And I think there's been some good comments at least that have shown how, it's not necessarily, I think, saying it's a guarantee. Like you could end up flipping this whole thing upside down and everything that we're saying ends up being completely wrong, because that's how the draft can be. You try to kind of just say, we're going to basically take the best shot we can on the dartboard, knowing that we're not going to hit a bullseye every single time. But if this is a much bigger bullseye, then that's where I think you'll throw that dart for the most part. And it's going to be interesting to see, because it's always the argument that has been is, do you take that defensive tackle or not? Someone brought up Ed Oliver. Bills were like pumping their fist in the draft room when they got Ed Oliver as the Lions took Hawkinson. And you can look at it later and say Hawkinson didn't work out the way the Lions had anticipated, but Ed Oliver did not work out to being that impactful guy for the Bills either, unfortunately. And it's just kind of how the NFL goes sometimes, is you always end up with some players that never pan out to their potential and others who just wow beyond anyone's expectations.
And, whoever the new coach is, that's going to have an impact on this. If they, who's going to be the defensive coordinator? What's going to be the scheme? If it's a 3-4 base, kind of like Vance Joseph, then okay, Zach Allen is a 3 technique, and then you could see moving Cam Thomas in to play the other 3 technique, that kind of 3-4 defensive end, and then Rashard Lawrence, and then whoever else they can get to rotate with him and stay healthy at nose tackle. But if it's more of a 4-3 base, they're a little small for those DTs, those 2 eyes or whatever, you need them, but they can play at that 5 technique, that defensive end outside, right? So, it depends. Some of it depends on that, but you're right. Thomas could either be a defensive end, a little bit bigger defense, or outside, a big, big outside linebacker, or a smaller defensive end, or defense. Well, he'd be small for a tackle, big for an end, I guess. Anyway, it just depends, right? It's so but part of it also is how they approach the draft. If they take Jalen Carter, right, then maybe Thomas, we'll see. Maybe he does stay outside. If they take Will Anderson, I think there's a much better chance Thomas is moving into that 3 technique role. A lot of variables. Let me just say hey to a few other people that jumped in here. Then we're gonna get to my mock draft.
I was gonna say, did you want me to finish out some of the picks I made over here?
Sorry. Yes,
no worries.
Do that. I want to respect your time too. So why don't we do that real quick? Give your thoughts or give some of your comments on the rest of your draft.
So we know, at least from the John Gambador report, Hopkins is looking more at Jacksonville or the Chargers. Chargers are the team that, if you look at Brandon Staley, a bit more desperation. I would say that would be a spot of, you can also see how Mike Williams and Keenan Allen have been hurt. Maybe that ends up being a place, along with the new coordinator, obviously, at least, and more that's now there. So with this pick, I was able to at least kind of address what I felt like were some of the biggest needs. Like, obviously, you're taking the best player. And then while I wanted an offensive lineman, there wasn't really one that was there that I liked, and the value was just too good for a need with Ringo. I did get Luke Whippler, and I wasn't able to end up seeing their John Michael Schmitz fall to me, unfortunately. But then we did get to a spot where you're then looking at how the team's constructed at the wide receiver spot, and everyone is 5'9" or smaller. Like, you're probably not going to have as much money to pay some of the guys. So I looked at a Jalen Hyatt, a guy who at least is a deep threat, a long receiver. Maybe you could say that he would be more of a Cliff Kingsbury type of fit on that side. But I think when you talk about bringing him in, whether you're going with Hollywood or not, having more speed on that roster, a little bit of that size, I think would make some sense as far as replacing some impact. That would allow Hollywood to do more of the slant route, kind of that possession receiver type of stuff. And then, of course, you can see I went lines heavy. I get a guard and Steve Avila. The halfback I picked, at least in day 3, was Kendry Miller, who produced like crazy this year. It was a strong, tough runner. Maybe that could be a James Conner type replacement. And of course, you just go for upside in the later rounds. Jackson Kirkland is a 6'7", like 330-pound guard who's played tackle before, which is kind of like to show the athleticism is insane. Braden Daniels, another tackle, I think could be a guard conversion. Suddenly you're talking about these young offensive linemen competing with the current offensive linemen, flushing the position and being able to have a very run first team that when Kyler Murray comes back, you're hoping that you're able to see the playmakers and these linemen be able to excel. And you just wrap it up with getting another defensive lineman. And I've got the surprise pick I had was a fullback with my last pick. Wow. If you're seeing a new offense, you might end up seeing a new offensive player. I liked Hunter Lumpke when I at least kind of got a look at the NDSU team this year. Just watched a little bit of them. Boy, I gotta say, they've got a fun tight end this year, but their fullback also, if the Cardinals go back to a different scheme now that Cliff Kingsbury's gone, which I expect they will, then that may be a position that they'll need.
Yeah, I like it. Jalen Hyatt's been a guy I picked up a lot of my mock drafts. Look, this isn't a great receiver class, in my opinion. There's some nice players, but going deeper and getting someone who's a little more of a developmental guy, and I like that. Going guard, we're going to need to figure out something at guard. We've got some players, depending on what we do with Hernandez and our rookies from last year, but could see going there. I like Kendry Miller a lot. He's actually a halfback. When I'm not taking Rashawn, I'm taking him most of the time. The value there, the production. So he's on a lot of my mock drafts.
It's good. Yeah. It's not going to be an elite athleticism, but if you look at James Conner and his ability and how he's been able to be like at least a capable starter. He's not like a high impact, like a Dalvin Cook type, at least, who's just going to like blow away 1,000 yards every single season, but you're going to probably see him be a steady type of back.
Yeah, for sure. And Braden Daniels, interesting. He's at least what they have for him on PFF. He's like under $3 bills, right? So like, I even wonder, like, definitely, that guy seems like a zone kind of, scheme sort of offensive lineman. Yeah, I even wonder, and I don't know if the skill set's there at his size. I even wonder if he's a guy that would convert to center, just being that kind of slight. I don't know. Cameron Young shows up on my mock draft, kind of more of a run stopper, right? So, and fullback. We haven't had a fullback around these parts in a while, but that'd be interesting, right? So
yeah. With Daniels, I'm very interested to see because there's some players who, when you watch them play, you say, "What's the problem?" And if the problem is he's under 3 bills, sometimes that ends up being a spot where you end up saying, "Hey, everything else seems to be able to check
Yeah.
out." I think this is also a spot of maybe he doesn't convert to guard, but depending on the scheme, like you said, if Arizona ends up being and running a zone scheme, you move him in from that tackle position. You also may take a look and say, "Hey, you've got a aging DJ Humphreys. You've
Yeah.
got obviously no guarantee of what's going to happen." Like heck, even with Byron Murphy, like for all we know, the Cardinals could say, "Hey, Byron Murphy will bring you this amount back." The Bears, with all their cap room, can say, "All right, add $1 to that. You know what? Add $10 million to that. We'll put you back with our other corner that we liked in Kyler Gordon out of Washington because we need to build this team." There's going to be, I think, areas where we don't know what's going to happen with this Cardinals roster with the turnover, which both makes it exciting and a little scary, I think, at least at times too, since there's so much
Yeah.
unknown.
There's a lot of anxiety, but I know this is also the most exciting offseason in a long time, right? I mean, it's new general manager, going to be a new coach. How do they approach it? So I'm kind of well, not just I'm excited to see what happens. What does a draft look like under someone other than Steve Keim, right? So, well, let's get to my mock draft. I'll kind of go through kind of my picks, and then we'll get your thoughts on it. All right. So I did trade back to number 5, and with the Seahawks in this case, and I also got another. I got 2 first-round picks out of that trade, and I still got Will Anderson. Like, so,
Wow.
A plus right there, right there. Like that's to me, like that's the dream scenario: is you trade back for someone who's going up for a quarterback, and you still get Anderson or Carter. Right now, will it happen? I don't know. It's plausible. Like, you look at the Colts at number 4. If we somehow get them to trade back by convincing them that someone else is going to leapfrog them for the guy they want, it's absolutely possible. We, especially if at least one quarterback goes ahead of us, and then we make that move, and the Colts move up for a quarterback. It's absolutely possible, though it's still a little tough. So we all know about Will Anderson. He, stud edge rusher. We're not going to spend any more time on that. Then at number 20, I went with receiver Jordan Addison. I'm not going receiver early often, but I like Addison's profile as receivers. That really good route runner. He's kind of been compared to Calvin Ridley, and I also kind of think he's a little bit like Chris Olave. Receivers that size who run good routes come into the league ready to go. Like, they produce quickly. To me, that's the profile. If you want a receiver who's immediate impact in the NFL, get someone who's a good route runner, not too small, not too big, right?
Right.
And I loved Olave coming out last year, and obviously he had a heck of a season. So I went with him there. I think that'd be a really nice receiver to kind of help, get the receiving core going. Then I went with a cornerback in round 2, Emmanuel Forbes, who's a really who played really well. He had 6 interceptions last year, right?
Ball hawk, it's great.
Ball hawk, right? Great. Had a PFF grade of 87.2 last year. Got better each of the last 3 years in that regard. So he's a player I really like. Some people have him as more of a first round potential. So I went with him. Then in the 3rd round, I went with Moro Ojomo. He is 6'1", 281. So I think he's more of a 3 technique, but he's got a little bit of pass rush to him. He's not a major pass rusher, but he's got a little bit of that. I think he's one of those 3rd round defensive tackles that I think there's some good value. Then, yes, I did not get John Michael Schmitz. I waited. To be honest, in the 2nd round, there were no trade partners asking to trade back. So I went with some other positions, and I went with Luke Whippler, who is younger than John Michael Schmitz. Didn't produce as well, but is still good. I like him. Then Rashawn Johnson, Kenny McIntosh. I double-dipped those running backs, got the big back, and then the receiving back. Warren McClendon is a player that I take a lot late. Right tackle, right? And that's what, he graded out reasonably well. His grades consistently were in the 70s throughout his career. Played right tackle in the SEC, so he's played against good competition. I think one of the reasons he's a day 3 pick, or he's available later, is because he's a right tackle, right? And if you're only a right tackle, you go later. But we need a right tackle. we need to work on the right tackle. We've got 2 left tackles. So he's a guy. I don't know. He's battle tested in the SEC. Would it shock me if he came in here and became a starter, a solid right tackle? Not at all, right?
Interesting, yeah.
So I like that value. Cameron Young, again, another guy who you had on your mock draft. No real pass rush to him. He's much more of a run stopper, but in round 7, getting a depth guy like that, I like that. Robert's saying no guard, tisk. Yeah, I don't take guards all the time. I sometimes do in these drafts. I think that we can, between free agency and the guys like Will Hernandez, I think we don't need to draft a guard. I do sometimes. But anyway, that's my draft. What do you think, Blake?
Yeah, I think a lot of people can say, obviously, the dream is you trade back and you can still get Will Anderson because it's an easy, like, home run. You hit it out of the park. You played everything well. You get extra picks to work with. I think that's the easiest part. Obviously, they give you an A+ grade because of all of those. I think the biggest thing people look at, and this is probably the reality that the Cardinals are going to face, is most of their offseason is going to be determined by what do you do with DeAndre Hopkins and what do you do with Hollywood Brown, because you only have Hollywood under contract for 2023. If you're going to extend him in the offseason, are you going to say that this is a new GM who maybe wouldn't have brought him in? There's a lot to be figured out there. I think that Addison's one of those guys. It's pretty easy, like you said, a plug and play. I just wonder, at least part of the area that I've seen with Kyler is that some guys just have better fits with some receivers than others. Like you can see, at least with Hopkins and Brown, it just made a lot of sense. Even I would say with the likes of Greg Dortch, you can see this year of how he was able to get open. Was even kind of almost I would say, if you're looking at Hunter Renfrow, that type of just be small, be quick, get open despite the small size. I wonder with Kyler, and we see a lot of this with the Excel with AJ Green, with throwing the deep pass to Hopkins. I would wonder at least if a Quentin Johnson maybe is the fit that you could look for, because this is a guy who a lot of people question the routes. People may question the separation. And then you watch a Mike Williams play with the Chargers and realize, oh yeah, those are the guys who can run fast, jump up, get the ball, make that play, run and make a guy miss, those big play type of receivers. I think that between Addison and Johnson, those are two very different types. I think that with Kyler, you can work with both. But with you seen with shorter quarterbacks, some of those go routes that he's done super well with to guys like AJ or Hopkins, I do wonder if the Cardinals wouldn't have Quentin maybe higher on their board. And again, this is all, just looking at the Arizona Cardinals. And I'm assuming this scenario that you're either expecting Hollywood to not be re-signed or at least him and Hopkins to be traded, because my goodness, and this spot going wide receiver again, people might just say, hey, just draft another linebacker in the first round while you're at it, Steve.
Yeah. I think probably in this scenario, I think Hopkins being traded is the more likely. I think where I went with this was the value was too. I like Addison too much to pass on him, and to get a guy who I think can come in and be as good as Ridley or Olave potentially. To get that guy who's just consistent, good route runner. We don't know. AJ Green may not be here. Probably won't be here. Rondo Moore can't stay healthy. Maybe Hopkins is here, but so, and if nothing else, it's maybe a future it's looking to the future after Hopkins, if nothing else. So I don't know that I necessarily gamed out in terms of who's gone as much as I just liked the player a lot. But yeah, those are some good points you're making.
Yeah. And that's where I think the draft is ultimately about both talent and need, because teams will definitely draft for need. Like we've seen that even with the Arizona Cardinals this last year. You can say, hey, Cardinals, there's a center that's falling. You going to grab him? Yeah. Oh, well, he wasn't there. So we need, then it's like, all right, well, you grab a pass rusher. No, we got 2 pass rushers we like. We're going to grab the tight end. We're like, you don't need a tight end. And then come to find out in the press conference afterwards, it's like, yeah, Zach Ertz is 32 and Max Williams is 30 and Max is not going to be ready to start for week 1. You're like, oh, so they had a need at tight end. Teams will still draft for need, and ultimately they try to find that balance. So I think you've done a good job of trying to find that balance in each of those. I think it'll be interesting to see, depending on how it goes for some of their offseason, because the draft, it does take place after the offseason, and we see teams every year. Some will go and grab that talent, make it an area of strength. Some won't.
Yeah. For me, I think in all my drafts, there are at least 3 positions that are absolutely must address: defensive line, center, and running back. And cornerback is that 4th one that I usually do as well.
I do think you need 1 guard also, because depending on, maybe you have that guy on your roster, but if Pugh's retired, and obviously this is a new offensive line coach, I think you probably want to draft at least 1 new guy that comes in. And one of the things that you can look at is Monty Ossenfort. He's found guys, at least in late rounds. That's been one of the biggest things that he's found, at least for the most part. He's found studs, offensive guards, and that's one of the biggest things. I think that if you're looking at this draft this year, and not to say that I would book it necessarily, but gosh, I would say that that's your strength, Monty. You're going to find that day 3, round 4 type of guy that can come in and be an starting caliber to all pro level center for us, somewhere in that range. That's, I think, part of why you bring Monty in the first place, because that was a strength of both the Patriots and the Titans.
No, that makes sense. I'd probably take guards about half the time in my mock. So definitely a position I'm looking at. I know we want to respect your time. So we're going to do one question from here that I think is an interesting question. And then we'll let you get out of here. Then I'm going to hang around and go over all the mock drafts, because we've had a great conversation, but boy, we're already at an hour and we've just got through our 2 mocks, but this is fun, right? So here's the question. We'll get you out on here. Then I'll hang out with the folks in the chat. Doc's Cards got this question again. Do we see Austin Fort taking a quarterback at any point in this draft?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think I would normally say yes, but again, like the quarterback carousel will be interesting to see, because it feels kind of like the Cardinals are a spot of they're probably going to need to get a starter depending on Kyler Murray's status. Maybe he's good for week 1, but whoever that coach is going to be, whatever offense they're going to bring, it's almost like I think of the Bruce Arians plays. He signed with the Cardinals and immediately Drew Stanton was brought in as a guy that he had been with, guy familiar with, who knew the offense. I think that that's going to be probably one determining factor. The second is that I could definitely see that, but if you're in a place where you're saying, all right, let's say Colt McCoy's back for the final year of his deal. They love having him around. He's like a coach. You want to basically have that stability with him. Maybe then you're like, okay, you got Kyler, you've got Colt, you brought in the other guy who knows the offense. Are you really going to draft a quarterback as well that goes in with those? I think I've said that I could definitely see it, though. I don't know if it's a for sure, but again, Cardinals need a quarterback. Often, would you rather say we're going to go ahead and have a David Blau guy, at least, who just kind of comes off the scrap heap, who may have to play in case of, let's say, Colt McCoy or whoever the starting quarterback is, maybe you end up in a weird situation. Would you rather have a guy who's a round 4 pick who's got that traits and talents, or would you rather end up with a guy who is like that Trace McSorley, who you start him for 1 game and immediately afterwards you're like, he's not going to be able to be a backup in this league? I think that there's a very good likelihood that they could take a quarterback on day 3. I just don't know quite yet until you find out, are they going to get a veteran in? Are you going to have Colt? And then obviously, of course, we're assuming that Kyler Murray is going to be coming back in 2023 at some point. There's already a lot of quarterbacks with experience then that are going to be in that room. It would make me wonder if maybe what I've said is, let's say Kyler comes out, he plays, the Cardinals are just okay. I could see next year the Cardinals go into it similar with the Eagles and a Jalen Hurts. If Kyler hasn't returned quite to form, then maybe you spend that draft pick on a higher quarterback in maybe 2024, depending on how things go. Because again, it's the NFL. It goes year to year with the best of them. And even when you got those multi-year deals, often, 2 or 3 years of security. And then you can see at least teams either hunker down with their quarterback or they move on. And that's just how it is, the NFL. And it means not for long, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, I think people are going to be citing the Brock Purdy success as why you take a quarterback. Everyone's going to get used to it. People are going to be talking, well, you look at Brock Purdy, you need to take a quarterback late, but it doesn't always work out because, Trace McSorley was a guy who was taking.
Trace McSorley was a 6th. Brock Purdy was a 7th. There's a lot less that goes into finding some of that. But again, I could definitely see it with a new staff, a new place, getting someone in who's a new evaluator. Yeah. They may have their own likes and dislikes, at least as a coach and as a GM that prefer another guy.
But what I think is going to happen, I think you're right. I think they're going to bring in a veteran who I think Jacoby Brissett is the guy. Drafted by the Patriots. He's been a spot starter. I don't know that there's anyone who's going to sign him and say, we're giving you the starting job, but he can come here and we can tell him you're going to start a quarter or a half of the season, get some good tape out there. I think Brissett's the guy. And I think they're going to go with Brissett, Colt, Kyler when he's back, David Blau until then. And I don't think there's room for a rookie next year. But the following draft, if Colt retires, if Brissett moves on, I could see going with like a quarterback on day 3. So I think that's probably what's going to happen. So, but we've got an hour plus with you. So I'm going to give you a chance just to kind of say whatever you want to shout out and whatever you want to say to everyone, and then we'll get you out of here. Then I'm going to hang out with the good folks in the chat. So Blake, let everyone know where to find you, what you're working on, where they need to follow you and listen to you, and anything else you want to say on your way out.
Yeah, got I think at least 2 upcoming episodes there for the ROTB pod with everything that's gone on, but you can find the writing at revengeofthebirds.com. Still gonna have articles there, and follow on Twitter at least, or try to go through as many either questions or comments. Just talk with people who are fans, or at least go and try to have good dialogue, I think is always important. That could be at Blake Murphy 7. Joe, appreciate you having me on again. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise, we'll see you again. We'll have you on here again. Thanks for being here. Have a great night, Blake.
Take care.
Later. All right, so it's gonna be me and you all in the chat hanging out now. So let me get through and let me get caught up on some of the comments. I'm gonna say hey to some of the folks that who have just shown up or who have been commenting that I haven't gotten to, and then we will get to your mock draft. So give me a moment to get through here. Again, thank you to everyone who's hanging out with us. I try to get to at least one comment from each person. If I miss you, I apologize. Rose Jenkins, thank you for being here. Are we even sure Byron Murphy is healthy long-term? He missed half the season last year. Not really a great contract here. Listen, it wasn't a great contract here. I know a lot of people have commented on that. I get all the comments on my videos. I know there are a few other people in the chat who talked about that. It wasn't a great contract here. And to be honest, you might see him maybe even prefer more of a prove it deal, right? A shorter term deal to try to kind of increase his value. So you could see that. I like Murphy. I know, again, he missed that time. I still would want to bring him back. But I maybe the hope is, at least as a Cardinals fan, is that he's not going to command the top salary because of that. Maybe we'll get a little bit of a combination hometown discount / the injury kind of discount. But I still like having him here. I think he's a good player, but yeah, I mean, that's a concern. I absolutely get that. Right. Cruz, thank you for being here. Let's just draft guys like that are very good at football. You know what I mean? Yeah. Steve Keim did not get that memo. Now, did he? Right. So hopefully we're just going to draft guys that are good at football, as simple as it sounds, but right, we need to do that. Thank you for being here. Want to make sure we've got Robert Moore, who I made it. Sup, gents? Appreciate you being here. Xbox Fanatic, good evening. Thank you for hanging out with us. Good to see you in here. It's your boy saying Dante Demas Jr., late round steal. Yeah, he's a receiver that I've been looking at too, as kind of a late round sort of flyer, right? Someone you kind of take a chance on. So I like that. Let's see if there's anyone else. Let's see. Xbox saying, I think we'll get paid, and all the interviews are just filler for look. Maybe. I'm starting to think that the Cardinals are balking on the Saints asking price, but we'll see what happens. We got Austin. What's up? Appreciate you being here. People thought the same thing about Derek Brown. He hasn't exactly lived up to the hype. He's been good, though. I will say this with defensive tackles. I think people underestimate how good they are because they don't put up the same sack numbers as edge rushers. But by the nature of the position, defensive tackles are more about run stuffing, disrupting, getting in the face of the quarterback. The interior pass rush, you get home sometimes with sacks, but it's much more often you disrupt things. And interior pass rushers don't get the big sack numbers, but that doesn't mean they aren't effective. So I think we sometimes maybe judge them a little not fair, but they do take a little bit of time to develop, no doubt. Josh Burleson has a similar question about Byron Murphy. He picked up quite a few injuries. I don't know, paying him is prudent. We'll see. Yeah, I mean, it's a valid concern. But I think that hopefully I think the team, JP is saying he has back issues. I think the medical is probably going to matter a lot on his situation, right? Let's see. We've got AZ. I know Aus has been here, but only 2 guys we need to re-sign, really, Byron and Zach. Again, too early to tell. Let's see if there's anyone who's just jumped in. I try to get everyone at least once. I think I've hit everyone here at least once in terms of the comments. Let's see. I think that might be everyone. So why don't we go ahead? Oh wait, Ben Cork, thanks for being here. We got to sign Dortch. I think we really should sign Dortch. Absolutely. I agree. I think he has been such a good player for us, and I want to bring him back for sure. Alone at last, just to call the Cardinal right, Grandizer. Yeah, it's just me hanging out with y'all, right? Dakota Bedard, thanks for being here. When you have the chance, check my draft picks on my YouTube channel. Okay, I don't know where your YouTube channel is, but I have to check it out. All right. Brian, I'm here. Okay, awesome. All right. Jordan likes my mock. Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate that. I really this is probably one of my favorite mocks I've done. If I were going to mix anything up, maybe I would get a guard in there instead of Cameron Young, but all these other players are players that I kind of like a lot. I maybe receivers a little rich, but I like Addison. But let's get to why you are all here. Your mock drafts. So I've got 21 of them. So buckle up, folks. I'm going to try to get through them a little bit quickly because there's a lot. We've had a great response. I appreciate y'all getting your mock drafts in. So the first one, Dr. Savage lived up to his name. Dr. Savage went all in. There are 25 players drafted here. This is a fun one, but not a realistic one. I will just say that because, realistically, there are 53 players on an active roster plus your practice squad, another 16 or so. This is nearly half of the active roster turned over. Now, not everyone here would be on the active roster, but it's fun. It's fun, no doubt, right? So there's tons of trades, right? Trading back, getting a ton of picks. Keely Ringo, Zach Harrison, an edge rusher, Luke Whippler, Jair Brown, Clark Phillips, Christopher Smith, Joe Tippmann, another center, Byron Young, Chandler Zavala, Trey Dean III, Deuce Vaughn, Luke Haggard, Jackson Kirkland, Fabian Levitt, DJ Turner, Braden Daniels, Muhammad Ibrahim, McClendon Curtis, Nick Hampton, Darrell Luter Jr., Jacadus Bonds, Hunter Lemke, Tyon Evans, Cameron Mitchell, Daniel Scott. A lot of picks here. There's some players I like. I like Ringo. I like Harrison Whippler. I think Tippmann's an interesting center prospect. If you missed out on the other ones, Brian Young. There's some players I like here. Not a realistic draft, but it's fun. So Dr. Savage, interesting done. People are enjoying this. You've definitely got some reactions. It's a roller coaster of a draft, right? Reminds you of the trade up for Ricky Williams, right? Right? Dude drafted the whole Senior Bowl roster. So listen, this is a fun one. Not realistic, but let me tell you this. When I play Madden, which I don't really play anymore because it's just kind of downhill, but when I play Madden, I love tearing down a roster. This is what my drafts look like in Madden when I'm doing a franchise because I trade away everyone and I just totally rebuild, right? But, not a punter. Brian calls it a fail. All those picks, not a punter. So maybe you need to, at least if you're going to take that many picks, there probably should be a kicker or a punter, right? So yeah, okay. But this is fun. Thank you, Dr. Savage. Now we have Chad Ireland. Chad's got a more conventional draft. He's got Jalen Carter at number 3. Obviously, we like that. And then, of course,
got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
It has got the man, the legend, John Michael Heiser Center Schmitz. Sorry, I have to get this comment before for the last video. Red Sea question: how many picks do you have? Answer: yes. I love it. That's Dr. Savage's. How many draft picks do you have? Yes. I like that. All right. But John Michael Schmitz. Then we got Garrett Williams, a cornerback out of Syracuse in the second round. I like the idea of going for a cornerback there. Andrew Voorhees, a guard. We talked about the potential of going for a guard. He's one of the better guards. I like that. Xavier Hutchinson, wide receiver. So we're going a little bit later with the receiver, which I kind of, again, I don't mind doing that. And Kenny McIntosh, we talked about him earlier. I really like him. Brenton Cox Jr., an edge rusher. So going with another kind of developmental edge rusher on day 3. DeMarco Hellams, safety. I take him late in a lot of my drafts. Obviously, we have our starting safeties who I love. We have got some decent play, from some of the veterans we've had back there as backups, but I wouldn't mind bringing in a third safety. So, and someone out of Alabama, he's graded out pretty well, pretty good than Ethan Evans, a punter. I like this draft, Chad, a lot. I really do. And then you traded back there a little bit. This is a solid draft in my opinion. I really like it. Jordan likes the Hutchinson pick, right? So yeah. And then of course, as Eduardo points out, we got to have the polka party, John Michael Schmitz. So this is a solid pick, right? Our solid draft. So well done, Chad. I really like this a lot. All right. And then we're going to go on to the next one, which is Chris Young. Chris, a active member of the Discord. Appreciate you being here. So he did a trade back, he did a haul, traded back with the Raiders, got the 7th overall pick, got a 2nd round pick, a 5th, another 5th, a 7th in the round 2 next year, traded back and still got Will Anderson, right? Like I did. So that is awesome. If you can pull that off, that is a win-win-win. He got Kalijah Cansey, a little bit undersized, but disruptive interior defensive lineman. He's a really interesting prospect that I like. Might need to put a little bit of weight on him, but he's a nice player, so I like him. I've taken him a lot. And then of course,
John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
it has John Michael Schmitz, so we always love that. DeJuan Jones, a tackle from Ohio State. We got receiver A.T. Perry, a nice receiver there on day 2. Hugh Blue Kelly, I hope I got that right, a cornerback out of Stanford. Jarrett Patterson, a guard, although he played center. This year he played guard, but the previous 2 years he played center. So he's an interesting prospect who could be kind of versatile guard or center. We've got Shamari Connor, a safety out of Virginia Tech. Kenny McIntosh we've talked about. We've got a tight end, Luke Schoonmaker. I will say, even though we think we've got like we've got 3 tight ends we think about right now, between Ertz and McBride and Max Williams. If we bring Max Williams back, I don't mind taking a tight end late in the draft, because Max Williams, and it's a little bit, he's been banged up. Ertz is older. Eventually it's going to be McBride and whoever else, we kind of develop. So I don't hate taking a tight end on day 3. DJ Dale is a player I take a lot, and an Alabama defensive interior lineman who's played reasonably well. If it's an Alabama player, they've got the tools physically. In the 6th round, I like that. Jake Moody, a kicker. Mohamed Ibrahim, a running back who's showed up in a lot of drafts late. So I really like that for sure. So yeah, I like this draft, Chris. I think there's some good things, and there's a lot. I really like it a lot. We've got Cruz saying, can someone in some way get the John Michael Schmitz video to John Michael Schmitz? I'm going to tell you, I tagged his Twitter account when I first published it. I haven't seen anything, but his Twitter handle was tagged on it. So, hey, if you guys want to tweet it at him, the link to the video is on my YouTube channel. So if you want to, it'd be great if he picked it up and enjoyed it. I'm sure he's probably heard that some version of that song made a joke about his name a lot, but please, if you all want to tweet at him, just be respectful, right? We want to be cool about that, but yeah. Can I get in? Listen, I might reach out and see. That would be fun, right? If I can TCR get an interview with John Michael Schmitz, that would be awesome. But Cruz, thank you for the super chat. Channel member, great supporter. Really appreciate that. It really helps, to grow the channel and help, help me to continue doing what I'm doing. So I really appreciate that. Rashad is going to make it happen. Rashad is on it. I love it. Right. Solid draft, Chris. I like it. I really like it. Red Sea, here you are, Red Sea. Red Sea sent me a novel about his notes on this, and he asks why I don't read them, and I tell him, well, because it's Mock Draft Monday, not Mock Draft Monday through Thursday. It would take forever, but he gives me a whole bunch of stuff about his. But Red Sea loves the draft. He is currently researching the 2027 draft class, I believe. So, all right. So Red Sea trades back to 9 and still gets Will Anderson. Seen a lot of that. And I think we all know that's not going to happen. But like if PFF's, letting it happen, then take the pick, right? But trading back for Will Anderson, picking up some draft capital, getting Keely Ringo, I like it, right? That getting him in round 2 I think is a great value. And then of course,
John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
It has John Michael Schmitz, Keandre Coburn, another defensive tackle from Texas. He's more the run stuffer, is my understanding. Then versus the guy that I took, but he's a nice pick. Brandon Joseph, a safety in round 3. Steve Avila, a guard, so like that. Says a guy who took over 2 hours to go through over an hour to go through 2 mocks. Hey, that was me and Blake when he and I get going, right? Yeah. That's fair though, right? But Moore's legacy enjoys the 2027 draft class, right? So we got Steve Avila, a nice guard pickup on round 3. A.T. Perry, who we've seen before. Ivan Pierce Jr., linebacker of Cincinnati. Cincinnati's been putting some nice prospects in the NFL. You know, they're for being a program that, you know, wasn't really on the radar, like the big programs were until recently. They've really got some nice players coming out into the draft, right? Obviously, Myjai Sanders and such, right? Kenny McIntosh, guy we talked about, Warren McClendon, guy that I took, and Jake Moody. So Red Sea, it's okay. No, obviously, yeah. No, this is good, Red Sea. This is a good mock. I like it. I'm just giving you crap. Nicely done, sir. All right, then we move on to Simon, who's in the chat. Simon Shee, thank you for being here. So he's got a couple trades. Ooh, so he's got a trade back with the Lions to number 6 and picking up another first round. Then he has us trading DeAndre Hopkins and that pick for Sean Payton a second. Now, I may be wrong here, but my understanding is, unfortunately, players cannot be in trades for a coach. My understanding is that's only draft picks. I could be wrong, but I think it's only draft picks that are able to be traded in that. So it's not realistic, even though PFF let it, but it's fun. So let's game it out, right? So Hopkins is part of the trade for Peyton. And then, Bijan Robinson, you know, so listen, folks know I don't believe in going running back in the first round. So I wouldn't do that. But boy, let me just say this. If you're taking a running back in the first round, he's the guy, right? This guy is thought of as like the best running back prospect in a little while. I'd say, I don't know, maybe the last person is the guy in New York. My brain, someone correct me. I know my brain isn't working. The Giants running back, because I'm old, my brain's not working. But anyway, probably the best prospect since him for running back since Saquon Barkley. Thank you, it's your boy. That's right, since Saquon Barkley. So if you're taking, listen, if you're going to take him, then great. If you're going to take a running back, this is definitely the guy to take. Cody Mauch, who is a really athletic tackle, right? So that's a nice player. And then, of course,
It's got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
So you got John Michael Schmitz. Keanu Benton's a nice player. I like Benton, right? Yeah, Jordan P likes him a lot. I think he's a nice prospect in there. I keep saying there's a lot of defensive interior linemen in the third round I like, and he's one of them, right? Then we got Jalen Jones, cornerback, who was originally thought to be a first rounder, now is more of a day 2. So I like getting him. We've got Andre Iosivas. I probably mispronounce that name, but a wide receiver out of Princeton. Then another trade back, then Jake Hayner, a quarterback. So you're going quarterback in round 4. DeMarco Helms, safety out of Alabama that talked about before. Justin Shorter, receiver out of Florida. Drake Thomas, linebacker out of North Carolina State. So Simon is saying the rationale is that we're looking to revamp our offense and add more dimensions and take some pressure away from Kyler by giving him a superstar running back. Listen, I will say this. I definitely agree that fixing the running game is going to help Kyler a lot. If you can fix if you can fix the defense, like build a really good defense and fix the running game / offensive line, Kyler's going to be set. And I think he's going to be, I don't think you need a ton of receivers to make that work if you can fix that offensive line, give him running game with the receivers we have to kind of build from, I think it can work. He's also saying, so Rashad, is the receiver, I think 6'5" wide receiver, T. Higgins comp. Okay. So, or he's responding to Rashad. He's a 6'5" wide receiver. Okay. T. Higgins comp. Okay. So listen, for me, my philosophy is the way you do the running back thing is you build a really good offensive line and go with guys in rounds 4 and 5. So that's not how I would do it. But listen, Bijan Robinson, he's going to be a good player, no doubt. So, so yeah, I think there's some nice players on here. It's not how I'd approach it, but there's some players I really like on here. So yeah, I appreciate that, Simon. Thanks for your mock. Next one, we have Robert Moore, who was in the chat earlier. I think he's hopefully still here. He did a trade back to number 7 with Raiders and moved a couple other picks in there. I got a second and a third and a fourth, and gave away a sixth and a seventh to make the math work. And he trades back. Then he goes Miles Murphy. When I trade back there, that's a guy I sometimes go there as well when I'm looking for that. When I'm in that 7th to 10. Sometimes Murphy's a guy who I have gone with there. Robert is in the house, so appreciate you being here. So then he's got Kalijah Cansey, guy we talked about. Then he's got another quarterback, Eli Ricks, who's a guy who, from what I believe, he transferred from LSU to Alabama. Graded better when he was with LSU. Grade went down a little bit with Alabama. That might be system, that might be adjustment, but still, he's playing in Alabama, right? So, so I like that as a potential pick on day 2. Rashee Rice out of Southern Methodist University, SMU, the receiver. Then he's got Luke Whippler, the center out of Ohio State, Andrew Voorhees, guard, Keaton Mitchell, a running back out of East Carolina, Zach Evans, a halfback out of Mississippi, Asim Richards, North Carolina, tackle, then Shamari Connor, safety. So yeah, I like trading back. I like the value. Miles Murphy, if you're getting kind of another edge rusher prospect, I like Kalijah Cansey. And then Eli Ricks, I like that. Rashad is, he's an LSU fan. Eli ran from the grind, don't want him, right? So yeah. But Jordan P likes Rashee Rice, great pick, tall X receiver. And like I said, this isn't a great receiving draft class in my opinion. Yes, there's some nice players, but it's not like what we saw last year. So in that kind of draft class, I like going with receivers on day 2 and 3. So I like it. And then Robert's saying both halfbacks are different styles. You saw it in my mock draft. I had 2 different running backs, right? I like getting the big kind of early down back and getting that change of pace receiving back. And, if you look at it too, again, Austin Fort came from the Patriots system, and you've seen them do that before. There was a couple years back where they took 2 running backs, and one of them was more receiver back, one was more of an early down back. So listen, I like taking 2 running backs here. I think you address the offensive line, got a little bit of help on defensive line, cornerback. I think you hit all of the notes that we're looking for. So yeah, I think this overall is a good mock. Some players and positions I like here for sure. All right, so we'll go on to the next one. Anthony Kennedy. I haven't seen Anthony in here, but he's usually in here. He traded. Oh my goodness, this is spicy. He traded the 3rd pick for Kyle Pitts, and then the 8th, a second round, and a 3rd round pick. I don't think the Falcons are doing that, even with the injuries. Moore's legacy, James White and Deion Lewis, a couple of running backs the Patriots had. Yep. I don't think that the Falcons would do that. I think, even though I know he's been injured, right? Another tight end, but I think they're going to stick with Pitts and build around him. But let's game it, right? I just think, I don't think that I think that's not great value for them, for Pitts, even like to give up their 8th overall, their 1st, 2nd, and 3rd for our number 3 overall, and giving us Pitts. I just don't think they would do that. But if you take Pitts out of it, then the trade is realistic, I think. So let's look at that though. Tyree Wilson. So he traded back and got Tyree Wilson, the guy that Blake had on his mock drafts. Then he's got Cam Smith early in the 2nd round, cornerback. I like the value there, so that he's got that going for him. And then of course,
John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
Any mock with John Schmitz is in at least in some way a winner. We've got Jahmyr Gibbs, a halfback out of Alabama, and then he traded Hopkins for that 2nd round pick that he got for Gibbs. So a lot of people doing the Hopkins trade, which may very well happen, right? Then receiver Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee, nice receiver from I think he's a little bit bigger receiver, over 6 feet tall. We've got Tyreek Stevenson, cornerback out of Miami, Florida. Gervon Dexter Sr., I don't know if it's Gervin or Gervon, out of Florida. We've got Jonathan Mingo, wide receiver out of Mississippi. Charlie Jones, receiver out of Purdue. Kenny McIntosh. Elijah Higgins, receiver out of Stanford, and Jake Moody. I think it's a lot of receivers. I know we're trading away Hopkins in this scenario. I don't think they're going to take that many receivers. I think they're, especially when you look at Austin Fort, where he comes from, I think you're going to see, and realistically, I think you're going to see a lot more offensive line than what we're seeing here. But I like Cam Smith in particular. Obviously, John Michael Schmitz. There's some nice picks here. So awesome. And obviously Kenny McIntosh as well. Thank you. Agent 47 Joe will play the song until April. When we get there, we will hate John Michael Schmitz, right? Maybe, yeah. Hopefully not, right? But yeah. Jason, thanks for being here. Saying what's up, Joe? Appreciate you, Jason Krell, for being here and hanging out with us. All right, so our next mock draft, Brian Darko, who I think we saw in the chat earlier. So I think he's hopefully still here. So he used the mock draft database. And he's got Will Anderson, number 3. Great pick. Osiris Torrance. Now, a lot of people think Torrance is going to go in the first round, but if he slipped there to 34, right? I mean, listen, if he was there at 34, as much as I love John Michael Schmitz and stuff, I'd have to really think about taking him. He's thought of as the best guard in this class. So at 34, it's hard to pass up on him, right? We've got Eli Ricks again. I like getting a cornerback somewhere in the draft. So I like that. Jarrett Patterson, we talked about him earlier, interior offensive lineman out of Notre Dame, played guard this year, but has played center before for the 2 years before that. Graded better as a center than he did as a guard in terms of PFF grades. So, if you're missing out on John Michael Schmitz and you're missing out on Whippler, Patterson's, there's some other guys in there. There's a guy out of Michigan. I think he might be on a mock later, a name I would butcher, but Patterson's interesting thought there. Then we got Jalen Jones, cornerback, who again was originally a thought for a while to maybe be a first rounder. So, I like the value there. We've got Jeremy Robinson, a safety out of Florida State. Keanu Benton, defensive line out of Wisconsin. He goes a lot earlier on PFF's mocks, but that's a nice player. Harrison Mevis, a kicker, right? So yeah, this good draft. Yeah, Brian, this gets a thumbs up from me. I really like it. Matthew Druitz thinks this is a really good one. Thanks for being here, hanging out with us. So yeah, I think you're getting some good feedback on that. Next mock draft. Mikey D, who I know was here earlier. Mikey, appreciate you being here. Jalen Carter, of course, number 3, a great pick. I love him as a prospect there. We've talked about him a lot. Andre Carter, I mentioned him earlier. When Blake was talking about Tyree Wilson as that, early in the first round, Andre Carter is a guy who is similar in terms of the big physical, long guy that, needs maybe to add a little bit of muscle, he's going to need a little bit of, development, but he's got the physical tools. He's an intriguing prospect. So getting him in round 2 as kind of a developmental edge rusher, he's kind of tall and long arms and stuff. So I really kind of like that as a potential pick. So I like that. We've got Deontay Banks, a cornerback out of Maryland. I haven't had a chance to look at his stuff much, but again, I like getting cornerbacks. I think day 1 and 2 are the place you really want to look for cornerbacks. So I like getting one there to kind of develop. Obviously, Luke Whippler, great prospect, like that. Another cornerback, Jalen Jones. So we got 2 cornerbacks here. Drake Nugent, another center. So you got 2 centers. I wonder if one of those guys is going to move to guard or if one of them is just going to be backup. Then we've got Nick Broker, a guard out of Mississippi. DJ Dale, a guy who's on a lot of my mock drafts, a guy I like as a late defensive lineman. The receiver Bryce Ford Wheaton out of West Virginia. Mikey is saying Andre Carter is my second round Will Anderson. Okay, I like it. Yeah, he's kind of an upside guy. He's going to need more development, right? He is not as polished or doesn't have the same moves as Anderson, but that's why Anderson's there at the, as one of the top picks, right? He's got the tools and he's got, the physical tools and, he's got the pass rush moves and he's developed. When you're going round 2 and 3, you're looking for guys that have, need a little bit of work, but have that skill set. So Andre Carter fits that. So I like that. Jordan P likes Deontay Banks at 66. So he likes that pick. So yeah, Mikey, this is a good draft, man. I really like this a lot. A lot of players and positions I like. You hit center, you hit guard, cornerback, defensive lineman, edge. Yeah, I definitely like that. Next up, we have Taj. Thanks for your mock draft. I haven't seen him in here, but he's real active in Discord. So he went Jalen Carter for number 3, Keely Ringo. So going back-to-back Georgia prospects. I like Ringo at that spot if he's there. Then we got Isaiah McGuire, edge rusher out of Missouri. Another one, kind of a day 2 edge rusher to develop. Then we have the center, and I'm going to try Red Sea, get ready. I'm going to try to pronounce this. Olusegun Oluwatimi. Did I get it right? I hope I didn't butcher it. Olusegun Oluwatimi. Anyway, he is a center out of Michigan who is actually one of the better draft prospects. A lot of people think PFF has him underrated, undervalued. So he is a nice, solid center. So if you miss out on Whippler and you miss out on John Michael Schmitz, then this is another potential center. Kenny McIntosh. We all love Kenny McIntosh. I think, at least based on where he goes in PFF mocks, I think you went a little early on him, but we like him in general. Charlie Jones, a receiver at Purdue, Aubrey Miller Jr., a linebacker of Jackson State University, Jadakius Bonds, wide receiver out of Hampton, then Jared Clark, a defensive interior out of Coastal Carolina. So again, there's a lot of small school guys you went with on day 3, which is, if you're going to go, that's the way where to go with them. But yeah, obviously I really like the first 2 picks. I like the center. I like McIntosh, although I would like him a little bit later. So yeah, nice draft. Agent 47 loves Isaiah McGuire. So there you go. Okay. Next up, we have Gazornik, Brian. So I don't know if he's been in here, but he's really active in the Discord. Really great dude. Appreciate his mock draft and him in general. Jalen Carter, the defensive interior, obviously. Eli Ricks, that cornerback out of Alabama. And Brian mentioned that he is he's enjoying that I'm going to try to pronounce his name. So he's got an edge rusher out of Northwestern. Adetomiwa Abadawari. Did I get close? Adetomiwa Adebawari. I think I'm close on that. I don't know if anyone knows. Tell me if I got it right, but yeah. Red C's going to tell me how to after. Yeah, he messaged me after on last one. Then we've got Luke Whippler, Kendra Miller, Emil Coyer Jr., guard out of Alabama. We've got Clayton Tune, a quarterback out of Houston. Then Warren McClendon, who we talked about earlier. Demario Hallam's safety, Alabama. I like this mock a lot. I love Carter, obviously, there early. I like getting a cornerback around 2. I like developmental edge rushers. Whippler, of course. Kendra Miller guy. I love getting Miller in there. Going guard is nice on day 3. I don't mind a quarterback late, though. I think they won't do that this year like we talked about earlier. But obviously I like McClendon and Hallam. So solid draft for sure. Real quick, we've got Jason with a super chat. Thank you so much. Off topic thoughts on the head coach search so far. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but let me give you kind of my thoughts. I feel like the Cardinals are balking on the asking price from the Saints. So I feel like we're at least exploring other options. I don't think Peyton's completely out, but I think we're looking elsewhere to consider weighing that. So that I think it's certainly not a slam dunk. D'Amico Ryans, it seems like he's going to Houston. I think, if I had to wager a bet, I think our next head coach is probably going to be either Brian Flores or one of the coordinators from the Bengals. That's just my hunch. I think they're casting a wide search like they said they would, a wide net. I like some of the people they've interviewed. There's some I wish they had that they didn't. So, I want to see how it plays out. I'm more open to younger coordinators than I think some people are. For me, it's not Sean Payton or bust. I would love to have Sean Payton, but there's other coaches I like. So yeah, that's kind of where I see it right now. It's going to be really interesting. Only one team has hired a coach, so everyone's kind of moving a little bit slow right now. So we'll see what happens. So thank you for the super chat, Jason, and I appreciate you. You're always just really thoughtful and supportive of when you're in here hanging out with us. So thank you so much, Josh. Thanks for being here. If Cardinals can get Jalen Carter, that's an A+. I feel like I really like him as well, right? So Okay, so overall this is a good draft. I like it. In general, yes, I do like it, even though you made me try to pronounce a name that I'm sure I butchered. But thank you, Brian. I appreciate you. Ozzy26, first mock draft submitted by Ozzy26, who's joined our Discord this last week. So Jalen Carter again, right? We have Jalen Carter with the number 3 pick. BJ Ojulari, whose older brother is with the Giants. So an edge rusher in round 2. Deontay Banks, again, a cornerback. Then we got Luke Whippler. We like him. Kendry Miller. We like him. We talked about him. Braden Daniels, we talked about a little earlier, tackle out of Utah, a little bit, a little under 300 pounds. So it's a little bit slight for a tackle. So it'll be interesting where he moves, but graded well. So seems like a good player. We've got Clayton Tune again. At quarterback, and then we've got Servosia Dennis. I hope I pronounced that right. A linebacker. I like taking an inside linebacker on day 3, just get some depth in there and or special teams. So I like that. I find myself doing that when I got an extra pick to use. And then DeMarco Helms, who shows up in a lot of my drafts. So Ozzy, this is a really good draft. Jalen Carter got some edge. You hit some offensive line. Maybe if it's me, one thing that I'm not seeing that I would like to see is maybe another interior defensive lineman later. I feel like we need a couple of those guys. Jalen Carter's a little more of that disruptive pass rusher, maybe get more of a run stuffer. So, splitting hairs, but I like this a lot. Good mock draft. A lot of players I like on here, a lot of positions like good job. Jason with another super chat. Thank you so much. Joe, would you trade back for extra capital though? I would. I'm a big fan of trading back, getting extra picks, especially in rounds 2 and 3. I know I talk about this a lot. There's some research that has looked at like the value in terms of the production you get versus the cost and everything. It's just everything baked in. And second round picks are like where some of the best value comes in terms of players, finding good players, sometimes really good players. So I just really like that. So if Jalen Carter and Will Anderson are gone at pick 3, for me, I am definitely trading back. There is no one else for the Cardinals that I want in the top 3 besides Carter and Anderson. So if they're both gone, I am pulling the eject button. I am trading back any extra capital. If they are there, if one of them is there, and someone is offering me a king's ransom to trade up because they want a quarterback, if one of those teams that are still in the top 10 is like offering a package of draft picks that exceeds, there's that draft pick chart that says each pick is worth a certain amount of points. And usually when you see a trade, each team kind of gets those points roughly the same, so it's even. And that's how they kind of, that's roughly how it works in terms of the value there. Not every team weighs them the same, but usually you can look at that and it's a good guide for what those trades look like for draft picks. And if a team is coming in because they want that quarterback's on the board, they don't want to be, they don't want someone else to come in and get that. And they are offering us a package of draft picks that is better than what you would normally get for that move. They're giving us next year's first and their second this year and their first this year and something crazy like that. Even with Carter and Anderson there, I'll trade back. Get the best cornerback in the class or get another really good pass rusher and get some players that I really like later, in round 2. So I absolutely would. But then I'm a fan of that, right? So, yeah. And like Jordan said, yeah, teams say screw the draft pick board when they're moving up for quarterback. So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping for a team somewhere between 4 and 7 or 8 gets enamored with a quarterback and throws a crazy deal at us that is just too good to pass up. So I'm all for that. And I know some people say, well, you don't pass up blue chip players. Yeah, but you can find studs all through the first round if you do it right. And we're going to, so anyway, I absolutely would. But Ozzy, great mock draft. Really like this. Let's move on to the next one. Rashad Paynes. Rashad has been hanging out with us. Met Rashad in Atlanta at the game, had dinner with him. Good dude. So Rashad has Will Anderson. Like it. We have Khalil Ringo at round 2. Like it again. Jalen Hyatt, Luke Whippler, Byron Young, defensive interior out of Alabama, Charlie Jones, Kenny McIntosh, tackle TJ Bass out of Oregon, and then another tackle, McClendon Curtis out of Chattanooga. Yeah, I like this draft a lot. You get the edge rusher, you get a cornerback. We need that. I like getting a receiver in there. Obviously, you got to get a center, which you do. You add some defensive interior line help, get a running back. You got two receivers there. Maybe that's more receivers than I'd go with, but get some developmental tackles later, which you kind of need to. So, yeah, I like this a lot. Jordan P, where do we go to dinner? I forget the name, but it was a cool place actually that Rashad recommended. Had a great chicken sandwich so Rashad, if you remember the name of the place, it was in Atlanta, but it was a really nice place. So really good job with the recommendation as well. So yeah, Rashad, I like this draft. Good job. Again, I can nitpick. If it's me, I'm going one less receiver, and maybe trade that one of those receivers out for a defensive interior lineman or another or someone else. Ormsby's, that's where we went. Okay, Ormsby's, nice little place. It was pretty cool. I liked it. So yeah, nice mock, Rashad. I like it. We have Canucks 3322, another person who just joined our Discord this last week. Appreciate you being here. I'm assuming you're from Canada. Maybe you're not. You're just a fan of the Canucks, but hockey team. But correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you're in here with us. But he's got Will Anderson. Then he went receiver Josh Downs in the second round. And then, of course,
it's got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
It's got John Michael Heiser, center Schmitz. Then he traded, for Hopkins there with that pick. And then he's got Matthew Bergeron, a tackle out of Syracuse. Clark Phillips III, quarterback out of Utah. Clark Phillips shows up in quite a few. Oh, that's you. And yeah, you're from Canada. Awesome. I've got a good friend up in Canada who I do some podcast stuff with that's not sports related, but that's you. So appreciate you being here. Thanks for hanging out with us, and thanks for the mock draft. Clark Phillips, he showed up on some mock drafts. My only issue with him, he's a little bit undersized at cornerback, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. Maybe more likely a slot. But, good player, though, right? We've got Devin Arshane, a running back out of A&M, really good player. Mekhi Gardner, cornerback out of LSU. And then he traded Marcus Golden for a pick. Now, listen, I love Marcus Golden. I think, sadly, he took, he kind of had a step back last year. Maybe he's on the decline. I like our young pass rusher. So I love Marcus Golden, but I get it. It's his time is probably short in the NFL. Unfortunately, and I know we talked about this in Discord. I don't think there would be much of a market for Marcus Golden. I don't know that anyone's trading for him, but obviously, still, it's fun. We're doing this for fun, so it's all good. Jackson Kirkland, we talked about him a little bit earlier. He's a guard who has also played some tackle. That versatility is nice. That's a nice player there in day 3. We talked about Kenny McIntosh. Love him. Cameron Letu, tight end out of Alabama. Again, if you're taking a shot on a player, there's worse places you can go than Alabama, because those guys, one thing, they were good recruits who had good physical tools, right? So, I like, don't mind going there. And then DJ Dale, guy I like on a lot of my mock drafts, and kicker Jake Moody. So I like some of the players in particular. I know Jordan really likes Downs. He's small slot. He likes him just a small slot, not a fit. That's the tough part, right? We have so many small receivers, but he's a good player. Listen, you got to get a center, which you did. And I like some of these picks, like Jackson Kirkland in particular, Kenny McIntosh. So overall, this is a good draft. Couple running backs, cornerback. I think you hit a lot of the right notes. Maybe a few things that I would change, but overall, I like it. So thank you for that mock draft. Good job, and appreciate you being part of our community, Matthew. Another super chat from Jason. Thank you so much, Joe. I love your content, buddy. One of the best. Thank you, Jason. That means a lot to me. I sincerely appreciate that. It means everything to me that I make this content, and that y'all get to hang out with us, and that you enjoy it. And it definitely, I love talking Cardinals, and the fact that people would want to hang out while I'm doing that means a lot. So I really appreciate that. So thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate you and your support. Matthew saying, I usually go Cansey with 34, but he wasn't there, so I had to go down. So, yeah, I probably, if he's not there, I probably either trade back, or there's some other It's tough because you're right. There's a lot of the players around there that I usually end up going with are either cornerbacks or edge rushers. And you went edge with number 3 with Will Anderson, so you're not likely to go edge rusher again. So I totally get that. I think for me, with if the guy I wanted, Cansey, is gone, rather than Downs, I'm probably going cornerback there because I think there's some really good cornerbacks that are still there. But I get it. The guy usually there. So I know I'm there all the time. The guy you like is gone, and then you scramble. It's like, so what do you do? And we're trying to mix these up. So sometimes I'll just, try something, see how it looks, right? So absolutely. So appreciate that. Brian Perkins, L1, thank you for being here. Love you, Joe. I'm late, but I still want to wish you a great night, buddy. You're the man. Thank you. Brian, another really great, supportive, just thoughtful dude. Really appreciate you. He's really great on Twitter and in here. Appreciate that. Avery, make sure to join the Discord. It is fire. Thank you. I appreciate that. Absolutely. We've got like 170, 180 folks in Discord. It's a really great community. If you aren't in there, you're missing out. If you've never done Discord before, it's like chat rooms, kind of a thing. Just check it out. It's free. The link is in the video description. And there's Cardinals conversations with a lot of folks you see in the chat here, like just day in and day out. We're in there and people posting news. And, I think we've got a really good group of people that it's not toxic like some of the stuff you see on social media, and, there's some debates that get in there, but we keep it civil. And, it's a good group of people. Again, a lot of the folks in here are in there. So if you aren't part of that, you really need to join. It's a great, and I hang out in there as well. So definitely want to be part of that. But Matthew, again, good mock draft. Thank you. And then we got a mock draft from Jalen, who submitted this on Twitter. Thank you for your mock draft. Will Anderson, number 3, Cam Smith, cornerback. I love that. So he did a trade. He traded our 2nd, 4th, and a 7th to move up into the late first round. So he traded up for Cam Smith, so moved up to get the cornerback he wanted. Then he went with Jalen Hyatt, receiver there in round 3. And then Luke Whippler, Ivan Pace Jr., linebacker, Kenny McIntosh, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, a quarterback at UCL late. So I like this mock draft in general. Obviously, if you're getting Will Anderson, that you like that, right? Then I like Cam Smith. He's a really good cornerback, one of the better ones in this class. So I like that a lot. And then Hyatt, we like. Whippler, get the center. So, the only thing here's the thing for me. The only thing for me that it's really missing that I want to see, for me at least, is a defensive interior lineman. We need some defensive linemen, like tackles. I don't see this on your draft. So if it were me, like that quarterback, I don't think they're going to go quarterback in the draft this year. I think they're going to, like we talked about earlier, I think they're going to bring in a veteran and go, someone like Jacoby Brissett. And so maybe, for me, I like DJ Dale, a guy from Alabama who's available in a lot of mock drafts. I'd probably, if it were me at round 6 with that last pick, that's probably what I would have done there to round that out. But overall, this is a really nice draft, right? AZ Oz likes it. Wow, this draft is amazing, Jalen. So overall, it's good. Again, I'm just kind of nitpicking a little bit here, right? So, but yeah, really nice. Let me get Fort Chubb asking, does Will Anderson Jr. count as another linebacker? More or less, yeah, in terms of, if you're talking about that we take all these linebackers, except he's an edge rusher. So, technically speaking, whether you count him as a linebacker depends on whether it is a 3-4 or a 4-3. And Jordan's commenting on that as well. If it is a 3-4, like we run now, the edge rushers are typically outside linebackers. But if you got a 4-3 base, they're defensive ends. So practically, it almost kind of doesn't matter what you call him. That's why people have come to use the term edge rusher, because that the person's doing, rushing the passer and sometimes dropping the coverage. And those are trying to stop the run on running plays. That's the primary role of an edge rusher, whether a linebacker, defensive end. In the 3-4, when they'll drop into coverage, I think more than a 4-3. That's really the kind of the difference there. But yeah, technically, if it's a 3-4, I guess, Marcus Golden's a linebacker, right? Jason with another super chat. Thank you so much. Would you trade D-Hop, and what would get in return? So what would we get in return? So I actually did a video on this where I kind of projected where I think his trade value is. I think his trade value caps out at a late first round pick, but a lot of people think we'll get a second round pick because of his age. I did some comps. Davante Adams is the closest comp, but Davante Adams was about a year and a half younger at the time that at the time that Adams was traded from the Packers to the Raiders. He was about a year and a half younger than Hopkins will be at the time of his trade, and that matters. So I think his value might be a little lower than Adams, but one of the other factors in this is that the receiver draft class isn't as great as other years, and the free agents at receiver aren't great. So there's a chance his value might be a little higher than people think because of the scarcity of the position. Would I trade him? If he says he wants out, I'm absolutely trading him. You don't want to keep a guy around, who doesn't want to be here. If he tells me he really wants to be part of this rebuild, I'd keep him around. He's really talented. I know that's hedging. I'm kind of really torn on this one. I get that he's a great player and you want to keep him, so I get that. But at the same time, if you build a team around a running game, offensive line, and a good defense, you don't need to have an elite receiver to still be good. But you're better with him. So I'm torn. For me, it really does come down to, if I'm Monty Ossenfort and I sit in that meeting with him and get a sense of where he wants to be. If he wants to be here, I keep him. If he hesitates or he seems like he doesn't really want to be here, I would go ahead and move on from him and thank him for his time. Right. So yeah, thank you again for your support and super chat. So that's me. Jordan P says, personally, it's unpopular. This isn't a popular opinion, but I would trade Hop. It's like if you're trying to reset Hopkins, if you look at the way I look at it, part of it is we're going to be 2024 is really when we're hoping, best case scenario, this Cardinals team is ready to contend for a playoff and be a serious team, right? If they get everything right, if they fix the offensive line, build a good defense, get Kyler healthy, 2024 is really the target year to really go for it, right? 2023, our best case scenario, in my opinion, is to be one of those teams that overachieves and is frisky, maybe is pushing for a wild card, but probably doesn't get there. So you're looking at that. He's 32 years old by the time we're ready to contend. So that's tough, right? He'll still be productive, but you have to take that into account. So thank you for the question, though. I appreciate that, Jason. Thank you so much. So next mock draft we have is Azios, who is in here. Jordan saying, so the Lions this year, Joe? Yeah, like, to me, the Lions is kind of the best case scenario for 2023 for the Cardinals, where you're building the culture, you're trying to get things right, trying to get the roster right, and you're frisky, you're chippy, and you're a team that is a tough out, but you're a year away, right? And that feels like that's, so I think, except, obviously they had their quarterback all year, that's the difference, but that's the best case scenario for me in 2023 is we're one of those kinds of teams. Even Atlanta's a little bit like that. Their record isn't great, but they're a team that is well coached, and but that's, so anyway, yeah, good comp there, Jordan. Thank you. Azios, who I know was in here earlier, he's got to trade back with the Lions. Speak of the Lions, to number 6, and picked up another first round pick. He went Miles Murphy with edge at number 6. That's a guy a lot of times when I'm trading back, that's a guy I take a lot. Then he went Christian Gonzalez, cornerback, who a lot of people think is going to be one of the first couple cornerbacks off the draft. Kalijah Cansey, that guy we've seen a lot in a lot of drafts, kind of disruptive interior pass rusher. He's got the trade, and that was the trade for DeAndre Hopkins. So use that, and he's taken Kalijah Cansey there. Trading to the Chiefs, I could see that happening. And then, of course,
got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
And then we've got John Michael Schmitz at center. Love that, of course. Rashee Rice, receiver. We've talked about him a little bit before. Good pick there. Andrew Voorhees, nice guard there. Clark Phillips, we talked about him. A little bit small, but he's a good player. So round 4, he's probably I think he's more of a slot guy at the NFL, but still not bad. Kenny McIntosh, we love. DJ Dale, you've heard me mention before, and then Hunter Lepke. So I like this. Again, you hit edge, you hit defensive interior a couple times. You hit running back, got a receiver in there to develop, center, couple cornerbacks, in fact. So I think you hit all the notes here. The only thing, maybe get a tackle in there somewhere, but this is a really good one, right? Matthew thinks this is the perfect one right here, so he likes it. Jordan loves Christian Gonzalez there, right? Isias is saying, I prefer to stay at 3 and take Carter or Anderson, but I played around with trade down to see how it would look. I get it. Yeah, I do. Like I said, I do that all the time. And I'll tell you, my process for preparing for Mock Draft Mondays, I usually do 8 to 10 mock drafts and just try different things. And then I set them aside and save them. And then when I'm preparing for the show, I go in and look at them. And I just look at them and I pick one that highlights players I want to pick, and hit certain notes I want to be able to talk about in here. But I like trying mixing up, because if every one of my mock drafts looks exactly the same, that's boring, right? And that's part of the fun, is seeing what those different scenarios look like when they play out. So I like it, right? And it's more fun when we trade down, right? Exactly, right? Good point, Agent 47, right? So yeah, 100%, right? So I like it, right? I think this is a good draft, I like it. Next up, we have James Chaffin, who submitted this on Twitter. James, thank you for your mock draft. Appreciate that. He traded back with the Raiders and still got Will Anderson. Seeing a lot of that in these mock drafts. Went with Josh Downs. We talked about him earlier. He's more of a slot receiver, good receiver, but wonder how it's going to fit. But he is a good player. Keely Ringo, like that. Then you went 3 cornerbacks. Ringo, Banks, and Jones. For me, I think that's too many like the Cardinals keep between 4 and 5 cornerbacks, at least historic. I should say this. Under Cliff Kingsbury, they kept 4 or 5. Now, will the new coach do that? We don't know. But teams usually max out at 5 cornerbacks, typically on the active roster. So you look at it, you've got Marco Wilson, Christian Matthew. If they bring back Byron Murphy, if they bring back Antonio Hamilton, right? That's like 4 right there. So like if you're drafting all 3 of those guys, it probably means you're planning to let Hamilton and or Byron Murphy go. And maybe that's what you plan to do. But, I wouldn't go that many cornerbacks. But I like the players in general. For me, I'm going 1 cornerback, probably maybe 2, but I have a hard time pulling the trigger on more than 1. But I like the players. Devin O'Shane, a running back out of A&M, really good player who we've seen a couple of mocks. Trey Dean, safety out of Florida. Ricky Stromberg, center out of Arkansas. So you went center much later. And Cameron Young, defensive interior. So, if you're going center that late, you can find starting centers that late. And certainly Monty Austinfort has a history of finding good offensive linemen late. For me, if you are going late, if you're doing that, you're probably signing a veteran center who can start, just because you don't want to rely on a 6th round center to be your day 1 starter. So as long as you are signing a free agent center a veteran journeyman type person who can start for you, then I don't mind that. But for me, I like taking center a little bit earlier. I want to get one of the 2 or 3 best centers in this draft. But again, if you're going with a free agent, and listen, if we're trusting, maybe we're just going to trust Monty Austinfort is going to do what he did in New England, which was find good offensive linemen late, which he did. So overall, there's some players I really like on here. A few things I do differently, but I appreciate that mock. James, thank you very much. Avery, who's been in the chat, we got to yours. So here's Avery 1X, his mock draft. He has Jalen Carter, number 3 overall, of course. And then, of course,
got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
John Michael Schmitz at center early in round 2. Then we've got tackle DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State, Jalen Jones, cornerback of Texas A&M, Colby Wooden, edge rusher out of Auburn, another developmental edge rusher there. Then we got Deuce Vaughn, halfback out of Kansas State, guard Nick Broker out of Mississippi, receiver Justin Short out of Florida, safety Christian Young out of Arizona. I like it. I think you hit the key spots. We needed, you hit all the spots that I want to see on a draft, for me at least: center, defensive interior lineman, a cornerback, at least one other offensive lineman, a running back, getting an edge rusher in there's nice. So Avery, I think you hit on all the spots I like to see. So and there's a couple players I really like on here. So I think this is a good mock there. Jordan P saying, I like DeJuan Jones as developmental right tackle. He has wingspan of someone that's 7'5". He has a crazy frame, right? So there you go. And yeah, I think in this, like, I often look at tackles, either a right tackle or developmental kind of swing tackle. I do think we need to get someone in there to develop to be a starting right tackle at some point, if not sooner rather than later. So I like it. So nice job, Avery. Next up, we have Grimdark, who submitted his today, I believe. He's got now. Wait a second, what's going on here? He's got a trade. Who's that? Oh, yeah, that's right. He has traded. I know he's kind of mixing things up here, right? He has traded the 3rd overall pick for Sean Payton, right? So listen, I don't think that's happening, but like we talked about earlier, but I like that you're gaming it to see what does that look like, right? So so he's traded that pick, and then we go Bija Ujulari. We've got Moro Ojomo, defensive interior lineman that I had on mine, Clark Phillips. Then he goes with a different center, Joe Tipman out of Wisconsin. And then he's got DJ Turner, the cornerback out of Michigan, Kenny McIntosh, we've talked about, DJ Dale, we've talked about, cornerback Darrell Luter Jr. out of South Alabama. Saints fans are going to love this one, right? Right. Sorry, Xbox Fanatic. Rumor has it John Michael Schmidt takes a song every time this song comes on. Right? If he did, man, he would be quite drunk right now. So I like it. So all right. So yeah, but like in terms of so we've got Sean Payton under this scenario, right, as our coach. You've got a center, right? You've got a cornerback, a couple cornerbacks. You got 3 cornerbacks. That's maybe a bit much for me, like we talked about before, but I like a couple defensive interior linemen, getting a halfback. Yeah, I mean, overall I like it. I think what I would do if it were me, I'd go 1 cornerback and those 2 other cornerbacks. One of them would be an offensive lineman, a guard or a tackle, and then the other one would maybe be a receiver, in terms of what I would like. But yeah, but overall, I like all these players. Yeah, Morin's legacy. That, like I said, most I can give you is a 2nd and 4th. If you haven't seen my tweet, I did a fun little tweet on that with the kind of the meme from that Pawn Stars. So yeah. So overall, though, some nice players on here. If I'm quibbling at all, obviously it's the 3 cornerbacks, and then I don't think we're trading the 3rd overall for Sean Payton, but who knows? Maybe, right? Awesome. And then we got Breadstick Daddy, who is very active in the Discord. I don't know if he's in here with us tonight, but he's got Jalen Carter, number 3 overall, Keely Ringo. We've seen that combination a lot. A lot of people going Carter than Ringo. I like it. Whippler at center. I like that as well. Then we got Voorhees, so working on the trenches there. Zach Evans, halfback out of Mississippi. Then cornerback DJ Turner, so another cornerback. Isaiah Land, an edge rusher out of Florida A&M. So kind of develop. Oh, this is you. Is that you? Okay. So is that you? Okay. Because like, I know you as Austin Hoy in here. And then, so if that's you, okay. Now 2 and 2 together. Okay. So we've got DJ Turner, the cornerback, then Isaiah Land, Warren McClendon. I talked about. I like him as a right tackle on day 3, and then Justin Short, a wide receiver. So, okay, yeah, hit on the positions I want to see. Right, defensive line, edge, halfback. Well, Austin, I'm glad to know that. I know, like, okay, sometimes I know people, like, obviously the 2 different names. I like, now I'm putting them together. Nice. Okay, awesome. Good to know that. I like it overall. Again, I'd go one cornerback instead of two. That's just me here. But I think you hit on a night. I mean, you really addressed the offensive line nicely. Got some help on the defensive side. Maybe one of those cornerbacks I would swap out for someone on the offensive, like a receiver. But well, you've got a receiver, so maybe not. So, but overall, good draft, I say. Nice, 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 nice. All right, then we've got Victor, who's sent this on Twitter. He's got a trade back scenario, picked up a bunch of picks, and then traded back again, picked up some more picks, and then took Cam Smith, then Sayaki Ika, which I'm butchering. And JP asked, "What's my impression of him?" I haven't really watched any tape on him or anything. I know he's really big, right? Like really big. So that's kind of a second round player. So is he one of those guys like we saw last year with Jordan Davis and such? Is he that kind of guy with those really big interior defensive linemen? The one thing I always worry about is how durable are they going to be? They're putting so much strain on their joints and being that big. But he seems like a good prospect. I haven't taken him in my drafts because I usually I'm either going defensive interior lineman with Jalen Carter at number 3 overall, or I'm waiting till later, like the 3rd round, because there's some players I like there. But he seems like a good prospect. So Victor went with him here in round 2, then Keely Ringo. So we got a couple cornerbacks here again. 3 cornerbacks. Emmanuel Forbes. Whoa. I mean, you got a lot of picks, I guess, Victor. So you're going to take them. But that's a lot of good cornerbacks. But I think I don't think you take that. I think you go in other directions with like 1 or 2 of those picks. But I like the players. For me, I mean, Cam Smith is good. They're all good cornerbacks. Emmanuel Forbes is really intriguing to me, a ball hawk in the 2nd round. So Zach Harrison, kind of a big edge rusher, so I kind of like him as sort of that Zach Allen kind of Cam Thomas kind of fit potentially. Jerzon Newton. Oh boy. I'm probably butchering that name, but he's another defensive interior lineman that I think is intriguing. There's just so many of those guys in round 3. I'm just telling you, look at those interior defensive linemen in round 3. There are half a dozen guys there that I think are intriguing that I often consider taking. Then we go with another edge, or developmental edge, and Byron Young out of Tennessee. Halfback Devon Ashane that we talked about. Joe Tippmann, so we went center there. Luke Haggard, tackle out of Indiana. Nick Broker, guard out of Mississippi. D. Winters, a linebacker at TCU. Then McClendon Curtis, tackle of Chattanooga. So Victor definitely went on defense and the trenches. So traded back a lot. So there's a lot of players there added to this team. So some players I really like. I think there's only so many rookies you want to bring in a given year, though. I feel like 7 or 8, maybe 9 draft picks. I don't know. I don't like getting up to 10 or 12 or 15 draft picks just because I wonder, do you really want that many rookies on your roster? Like you bring in rookies, undrafted free agents, and some of them make the roster. A lot of them make your practice squad. But I don't like taking a guy in round 6, putting him on a practice squad and having him get poached. So that's just me. I'd rather, I love concentrating on rounds 2 through 4 or 5. Get like plenty of picks there, get a few extra picks there. But I don't, anyway, so that's too many picks for me is a long way of saying that, but I like a lot of the players on here. Mr. Money Man. I asked him how to pronounce that. He's like, I don't know. It's Money Manetti, Money Manette, Money Man, but he's active in the Discord. Appreciate you submitting the mock draft very late. I gave him a little bit of crap about that, but so he's traded back. Got a bunch of draft capital, kind of moved back right in this trade with the Panthers. Devin Witherspoon, arguably the best cornerback in this class. He had just a stellar season for Illinois. You look at his PFF grades, are super, super good. He's a guy I'm intrigued by, and I really like him. If I trade back, in that first round. And, obviously, and Anderson and Carter are gone. He's a guy I look at getting a really good cornerback. So I like him. And then obviously
got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
It's got John Michael Schmitz, so that's a winner right there. Darnell Wright, right tackle, I believe, out of Tennessee. I think someone said he was the best right tackle in the class, so get a good right tackle there. Then we have an edge rusher, Felix Anudike Uzoma. Yeah, that's Uzoma. Anudike Uzoma. Everyone's just going to pick names that are really tough because you want to see me try to pronounce them right. So but an edge rusher out of Kansas State. Then we got Moro Ojomo, defensive interior lineman out of Texas, who's on my mock draft. Like it. We got Steve Avila, a nice guard out of TCU. Noah Sewell, linebacker out of Oregon. Kendre Miller again, halfback out of TCU. Byron Young, defensive interior out of Indiana. Charlie Jones, wide receiver out of Purdue. Clayton Tune, quarterback out of Houston. Michael Turk, punter out of Oklahoma. And then DeMarco Hallam, safety out of Alabama. A lot of picks, but there's some players I like there. Again, hit the cornerback, center, offensive line, get the trenches, defensive line, got some halfbacks, cornerback, a lot of players I like on there. So I think that's overall a good draft against a lot of picks, but overall some nice players in there. And guess what, everyone? We made it. Whoo! 2 hours and 20 minutes. So that's a thing. So we did one heck of a long mock draft Monday. And that was fun, right? Thank you all for all of your mock draft submissions. Thank you all for hanging out. Those of you who hung out the whole time. I wonder if I don't know if the comments have frozen or I haven't seen new comments in a few minutes. So if I'm missing your comments, let me start by apologizing. I know that happened a couple weeks ago, but I might not be getting your comments. I'm going to go to the live video here and just kind of check that. Yeah, it looks like I'm not getting the comments. So I apologize, everyone, that I probably haven't seen your comments in about 10 minutes. Nope, now I'm getting some of them. Mikey, thank you. Appreciate that. Cruz, Suns win. Yay. Hopefully they're going to start winning a little bit more. So yeah, thank you all for hanging out with us. This was a lot of fun. Thank you to Grandizer for holding things down in the chat. Thank you, Mikey704. I see your comment just got here. What would be going on? Well, we just went 2 hours and 20 minutes and we're wrapping up. So, but you'll be able to watch the replay. Mock Draft Monday, tons of fun. I've got guest hosts lined up for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to have some different co-hosts on with me each week. So make sure you get your mock drafts. I'll tell you what, we had 20 submissions this week. If it keeps going like that, I might have to start kind of making a little bit of a cutoff, like the first 15 or something. We'll see. Right. But sorry, Mikey, I know you're late, but the replay, you can watch that. Hopefully we'll have a head coach next week. Right. We'll see. But again, thank you everyone for hanging out with us. Thanks for your mock draft submissions. This has been so much fun. I'm looking forward to doing this, every week between now and the draft. So we'll keep doing this. And it's going to be, we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to learn about the prospects together, hang out. And if you haven't joined the Discord, make sure you do that. There's a link in the video description. Other than that, we'll see you next week. So I'm going to put out the shout outs to my channel members to thank them for their support. And we will see you all next time. Peace.